covered yesterday in the 11 o'clock hour of the show was around the transport system in the Northwest and challenges that are being experienced in the area of the Ngakamudiri municipality, in particular Dinukana area where bus services have collapsed. So in doing that story, there's a lot that we were able to uncover yesterday. This relates to generally some of the challenges that bus service providers are experiencing, and just what has led to the collapse of in particular one company, Atamelang Bus Service. So the director of Atamelang Bus Service, which received its termination notice towards the end of last year, he called into the show to speak about what had led to their collapse. And I thought it might be interesting to raise it as an issue on the open line. So I don't want to get into the nitty-gritties of, the current situation in the Northwest. But I want to use what the director of the Atamelang Bus Service had to say on air as part of a case study, really. Because, yes, their business is now effectively going under. They've lost the contract with the department because they weren't able to deliver according to spec. They've received their termination notice. They now have to go find business elsewhere. The director says part of the reason why they were in that position in the first place is because of how they were treated as a service provider by the government. So he raises the issue of late payments. He raises the issue of contracts that are, irregular. So 1 year you have the extension of a contract for a year and no clarity about whether it will be renewed. Then you have to, you have to wait on another renewal. You'll get 18 months, you'll get 24 months. So the lack of consistency means that they weren't able to go to financial institutions and capitalize their business accordingly. And that's part of why he believes that they have failed. So he puts the failure of the business at the door of the department. And listening to Harry's story, I asked myself, I just wondered, how many South African entrepreneurs, business owners are in the same position as somebody like Harry, who got a contract, took a leap of faith, went to secure whatever funding they needed to secure to buy equipment for their business, but experienced all of these challenges. Now, when we talk about late payments, it's not a month or two, 6 months not being paid. What impact does that have on your ability to function and stay afloat? This is what Harry had to say, and I just want to know how many Harrys we potentially have out there, and really questioning, right, the business owners that have to deal with the impact of how they're treated as service providers. We'll run through those figures of how government has a backlog of paying service providers that runs into the billions, right? But this is the impact of that. So this is part of what Harry had to say.
Started in 2004. We got in there as just 4 black people who used to work in Northwest Transport Investment. We did that. We came in 2004, we bought brand new buses, Cathy. Over 100 buses, we got those buses there. We ran with those buses. The bus arena have gone down. They need service, they need maintenance. Every bus, if you go to the compliance, if you ask how long do you keep a new bus on the road to give proper, safe, efficient service to your passengers, it must run for 7 years. After 7 years, you refurbish. Another 7 years, at about 15, 14, you change the chassis underneath. Now, our buses, Cathy, over 100 have been there since 2004. None of this has happened. You know why? We can only do that if we have the money to do it. The rate that they're paying us, Department is the money that was paid us last 2004. We're still running with it. Our contract ended 2011. In 2011, it has always been extensions, 2 years extension, 1 year extension, 2 years extension. We can't go to the bank. We've got facilities with the bank, women finances, but they cannot give us new buses because our contracts are very short. From 2012, we've been struggling.
So that's just an outline of some of the challenges that Harry spoke about as a business owner. I'd love to hear from you, and especially just what your experience has been. Are there other Harrys out there who find themselves in similar situations where their businesses are literally going under? And yes, there could well be things that they needed to do differently in terms of how they ran their own operations, but also some of the administrative issues that unfortunately are not always in your control. I'll take your calls on 086 000 2032. That's 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. That's 0614 104 107. We'll take a quick break. It is the open line, your national roundtable. Let's get the conversation going.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
With January, why January when you could save with low-cost insurance for your older car? With Outsurance Essential, you get up to 1 million rand liability cover. So if you cause an accident, the other car could be covered for up to 1 million rand. Add motor warranty, which covers you for mechanical or electrical breakdowns. Get saving with Outsurance Essential for unfinanced cars older than 5 years and valued at less than 130,000 rand. SMS car to 43187. That's car to 43187. Licensed insurer and FSP, T's and C's and information online.
SABC CSI, in partnership with SAFM, will be giving away 20 laptops to Tetlanyo Secondary School in Kimberley on the 31st of January 2025. Tetlanyo Secondary School has been nominated by the SABC to receive 20 laptops after writing a donation request to enhance their ambitions to be 4IR compliant and increase the number of learners ready to participate fully and productively in the country's economy. Tune in to SAFM on the 31st of January and listen to The Talking Point, broadcasting live from the Tetlanyo Secondary School. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana, weekdays 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, let's get the conversation going. It is the open line. I'm going to begin this morning again in Donnybrook. Many of you would remember the call we received from Sbu yesterday, whose son is out in the DRC. A call from a very distressed father at the time. Sbu, you're back on the line. Good morning to you.
Sis Cathy, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm much better, sis.
Yes. Let's talk about what has happened in the last 24 hours then.
Sis, he's okay. I spoke to him. He told me the Sake base, our Sake base came and gave them more ammo. He confirmed that they are still fine, except for the 4 that died, that passed away.
And was he able to give you any more details around what happened there?
Well, sis, what I asked him was about the video that is circulating of the white flag, and he did confirm that what Spiwe Dlamini was saying was actually correct. They had to put up that white flag due to protocol, and the rebels had to come pick up their bodies around our base.
So he basically confirms that is what happened on site, that is a legitimate video.
Yes, he said it's legitimate, but they were not surrendering. It's the protocol. They had to raise a white flag. The rebels had their white flags up so that they could come and collect their bodies that were scattered all around our base in Goma.
Is there communication, a clear communication with them as the soldiers on the ground about what this phase of the operation entails and how long it's going to continue for, again, given the challenges that they've been experiencing?
Well, Sissy, I think the rest is on our political leadership. But after I listened to Scopa yesterday, and then I heard that Denel failed to register the licenses of our missiles, which give rise to the fact that we can't send our Grippins and stuff to go and help them because our missiles are not registered. Those are some of our failures. I don't know whether we've got some in stock or what's going on, but their cry is for air support.
Sbu, it sounds like it has been such a stressful time for you. And how's the rest of your family also holding up?
We just keeping on. We're just keeping on. We understand it's his job. He is very proud of his job, and we are very proud of him. But with our political leadership, that gives us nothing, and with the secrets that our defense force are keeping, they're not updating us of anything. So all the information we get is what the rebels and backed up by Rwanda are posting on social media, and that keeps us very stressed.
What would make things easier for you as a parent and as a family member directly affected by this conflict?
If our leadership can give us information of what's going on, tell us the truth, instead of keeping things close to them and we hear this, that and that, because it's not always where you can just get hold of them. It's only when they've got Wi-Fi, then you can make a WhatsApp call to them. Other than that, there is no other way of getting hold of them. So if we don't get any information directly from them, we see all these videos on social media, and then you get very confused of what's going on and whether they're still alive or what. But he promised me that our special forces are doing the best they can.
Sbu, I can imagine your heart must have stopped a little yesterday when you were struggling to get a hold of him and there are these reports of more people being killed.
I was very stressed. I can tell you I was very stressed. I'm diabetic. I felt like fainting.
Such a difficult period, especially for you as the family's Boo. Well, let me take this time to appreciate your getting in touch with us and also keeping us up to date in terms of what is happening with your son. We're glad to hear that he's doing okay, and we'll absolutely continue to keep in touch with you, Sbu. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Cathy, for caring. Thank you.
Sbu out in Donnybrook. Second day that we're speaking to Sbu. His son, one of those caught up in the conflict. You can hear the anguish in his voice. You can hear his entire demeanor just in listening to him speaking about how much a strain he's taking from this situation. And I guess okay really is okay as okay can be under the circumstances that one is faced with, that one has to deal with. But it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. Surely, especially when we have lost lives, there should be better communication, specifically and especially with the families of those whose loved ones are fighting on the ground in the DRC. It cannot be that somebody like Sbu has to wait for his son to be able to get Wi-Fi, his son involved in the conflict, by the way, just to make sure that he's okay, because there is no official communication with them from government, from the powers that be, despite the volatility of the situation. It is really an unfair situation to be putting people in. Dean, you're calling us from Bombela. Good morning. Good morning, Dean.
Yes, I've got a bit of a problem, and we sometimes call people business people, people who are not really entrepreneurs, people who are not really business people. Providing service to the public, it's the government's responsibility, not private people. So the government needs to jack up its act and start providing service to the people. If you say to me you are an entrepreneur, tell me you can manufacture ARVs. Tell me you can manufacture the fighter jets like your F-16 in America. And then in that way you can tell me you are a businessman. You are selling something that which nobody else can do. But calling yourself a business person by having buses or taxis and then go to government and tell them to give you a tender, and then at the end of the day we must call you a business person. No, for me, that doesn't work. I think a business person should be...
So, Dean, you don't think that somebody who's operating taxis is a business person?
Yeah, privately. When they do it privately, yes, it's fine. But I'm talking about when you take that to government, and then instead of government providing the service by having trains, by having buses, government itself, people should be employed by government, and then having provident funds and all those things by government, not for private people who come to build houses and then tell us, or bringing security companies in government buildings, and you're telling me those are business people. Come on. They're not business people.
Why don't you regard them as business people? Because you could equally offer a service to both government and private players. The same service. Take security guards, for example. You could have a security guard that is contracted with government and also contracted with private companies.
Yeah, for security, for me, that is government's responsibility. Security is the ones that are protecting government buildings and institutions must be government. It should not be private. The ones that the ones that is making the uniform for nurses, police, traffic cops, soldiers, it should be a government entity or company. It should not be private.
Okay. All right, Dean. Dean, out in Bombela, I hear you. People who do business with government are not entrepreneurs. They should not be calling themselves entrepreneurs or business people. Okay? That's one perspective. I'll take your calls. 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. It's 9:30. Time for your latest news headlines.
Good morning. In the headlines, job creation, sustainable energy, reviving the country's economy, and the recent killing of the SANDF members in the DRC, among others, are set to top the agenda of the first Cabinet Lekgotla of the year, which starts in Pretoria later this afternoon. Northwest Police have opened an inquest docket following the discovery of a body at Margaret Shaft in Stilfontein. And Treatment Action Campaign says more than 20,000 South African healthcare workers face potential job losses following the US government's cuts to aid funding for international development. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
This January, to save money, you could cut back on the family braais, or you could switch to Outsurance and save on your car insurance premium. Get a quote, and if Outsurance can't beat your car insurance premium, ask them for 500 Rand and make that 1,500 Rand cash if you've been claim free and with the same insurer for 3 years. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. With Outsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
Owning a small or medium-sized business takes courage, skill, and determination. The Clientele Legal Business Plan is there to protect, guide, and assist your business in managing the legal risks. Let us handle your labor matters, employment contracts, CCMA referrals, and so much more. Our team of professional lawyers are standing by to assist you. SMS SAFM to 42770. That's SAFM to 42770. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
Life is too short for long-term grudges, but when it's the Soweto Derby, Ayamadoda, Aipeli, black and white confronts gold and black. The Buccaneers believe Yonkindao, Ibagabaga, Yaphumelela, while Amakhosi still emphasize Ikhosi, Alphelo Moya. Experience Mzansi's biggest football rivalry, Orlando Pirates versus Kaizer Chiefs, on Saturday, 1 February at 2 p.m. live on SABC1 and at 3:30 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The SAFM Playwriting Competition is closing on the 3rd of February 2025. Explore the theatre of the mind and write your 60-minute radio drama play and email it before 5 p.m. on the 3rd of February 2025. Late submissions will not be accepted. For further information about the competition, visit safm.co.za or send an email to drama@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. Hashtag SAFM Talking Point.
We continue the conversation on the talking point, and of course I'm taking your calls on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial, 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107.
Good morning, Cathy. This is Mafrika in Sirikune. Our president is Cyril Ramaphosa. You know Cyril, man. Cyril, you know her. You know him, eh? Cyril. And our Minister of Defense is Angie Motsekh. We all know Angie. We all know Angie. So I think expecting much from them, it will be a waste of time. Let's just put our soldiers in prayers, man, so that they come back home safely.
My name is Cathy. I'm not a business owner, but I'm a SRD grant recipient. And I know how it feels like when you don't know when you're going to receive it. There's no specific date. You know, you can't plan for anything. If you want to need to register somewhere, you need to apply, make applications, and you're dependent on that money. You don't know when you're going to get it. So it's the same thing with the business. I can only imagine it's worse because they've obviously borrowed huge amounts of money. Yeah. It's the same thing. We're frustrated. It's frustrating.
Hi, Cathy. This is Mozile Saba from Bloemfontein. I just want to emphasize what Dean is saying. I think I understand his point. He's basically saying that if you are not able to produce a product that you sell in the market, you can't call yourself an entrepreneur. But when you are a middleman that is doing that which government is supposed to be doing, it's just a matter of extending an office from government, basically. He does not regard you as a business person, as an entrepreneur. I think I understand him there. Thank you, Cathy.
All right, let me go to Anonymous in Cape Town. Anonymous, good morning.
Anonymous, good morning. Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to SAS listeners. Thank you, Cathy, for taking my call. Cathy, here in Cape Town, we're using a golden arrow bus. Are you still there, Cathy?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. We are using a golden arrow bus, but I've got a problem with the drivers, with some of the drivers who's got a bad attitude towards the passengers. This morning, my heart is still bleeding. This morning, there was a young lady came from there. I mean, he stopped the bus, and then after that, he came with a cash of which it was 40 rand. He's going to pay 24 and 50 cents to go to airport. The driver said he don't have a change, of which he asked for the passengers a change, One lady gave 210 rands. From there, as the driver is driving, he's going to the next bus stop. This lady, she's already got the change, but the driver chose to stop and tell her, must get out. I don't have a change. The lady said, there is a change. I've got the change. And the man is still continuing, must get up. I don't have a change. And my problem is, their attitude is like we're asking for a trip or we're asking for a lift. We pay those tickets. And then it's only 2 buses which I use. Those drivers, their attitude is not right. And my problem is, I know Golden Arrow, he took the drivers and sent them to the course where they can handle the people. But those 2 guys, they think they are owning the bus. Each and every passenger, if he's there, is just intimidated because the driver, even if you stop, he will stop far and then you must run to the bus. You stop on the bus stop, he will stop far. You must run to that bus. If you don't run, he's going to go.
It's about the quality of service, right, Anonymous? That you there's a certain level of quality that you expect, especially also because you are paying. Even if you weren't paying, somebody else is, the state is, and so it should be delivered at a particular level.
Yes, Cathy, and then my problem is there is a good driver by Golden Arrow, some of them, but those 2, they choose to be a boss of those drivers. Like they owning. If you getting in, you won't say nothing. I don't mind if I came there and then I greet the driver, he don't greet back. I don't mind about that. If he just gave me my service, and then that's all. There's a lot of people outside there. They are looking for a job. Who can work with people? I wish people of Golden Arrow, they can take a note of those 2 buses. It's coming from Makaza to Panorama. It's early before 6. If they can put the inspector there, the private inspector, just to check how those drivers, they are treating people. It's so painful to see a black people treating a black people like a dog.
Yeah, Anonymous, all right, thanks for that call. Anonymous out in Cape Town. And it is something that can be so dehumanizing, right? Just stopping 50 meters ahead of the bus stop. Because remember, people are now ready to go to work. Now they must be running after the bus, chasing behind it. Then you have to start sweating. It already ruins your day. By the time you get to where you need to get to, you just feel like it's been a whole 24 hours. So I completely hear you, Anonymous. Thabo, you're in Mafikeng. Good morning.
Good morning, Jesse and SEFM listeners. I'm Thabo in Mafikeng.
Go for it, Thabo.
First of all, I'd like to send condolences to fallen peacekeepers and speedy recovery to the injured ones and wishing strength to their families. It's so heartbreaking, and we are so sorry about that. And getting into my point, I'm residing here in Mafikeng, and I can take it, Cathy, on a daily basis. We see a state of things deteriorating on a perpetual basis. You talk about service delivery, you talk about municipality having to render services to its communities. But main thing that I actually want to talk about here is that with regards to the Atamelang bus services, because I am in Nakamudiri Molema and Dinukana is in Ramotsiri, so we're just in the same municipality of Nakamudiri Molema. You know, when you travel around these municipalities, the state of roads where these buses are ferrying passengers are so heartbreaking. They are so bad in the sense that even when you are on those buses, when they travel from villages to the towns or the neighboring areas, when you are a passenger in those buses, when you have a pain or when you're suffering from a certain disease, the condition of those roads, they can only exacerbate the pain that you are suffering from. And then to make issues worse, when we experience the rain, those buses cannot drive on those muddy roads. They would get stuck on those muddy roads. And this thing has been going on forever and ever. And having to consider the fact that those buses are being used or traveling on those bad road conditions, that can only contribute towards the mechanical breakdowns. And some of the Atamelang buses that we feel as we drive around here in the areas of Mafikeng, we would see them stuck. And some of the things that we normally say would say that they're stuck as a result of petrol, not necessarily understanding the conditions that those buses are driving under. So we as communities, we as observers would just be in a rush to judge what we see, not understanding what the frustration of the bus drivers or the company owners are experiencing. So with regards to what our government is doing less in terms of making sure that the communities get roads that are usable. In the recent past, or in the past, the communities here in the Northwest, they would go to the street, they would bend tires, they would block roads as a result of bad road conditions. And this has been going on for many, many years. I don't want to mention issues of the previous government, but with regards to the previous government, they would on a regular, on a perpetual basis, go to the public works, they would go and surface or re-gravel or try to redo those roads so that they can be usable for the communities in those areas, for the public transport. But with regards to the current situation, they'll just leave everything to an extent that even those people that are using their private taxis, the taxis would come in the community, but within a short space of period of time, within about 8 months or 11 months, the suspension of those new conditions, they would be in the bad conditions. So I am saying our government does not care to our communities. What they only do, our government, they would they would come up with some defense mechanism rather than having to assist people when they cry. Because sometimes other people would approach the government, they'll write letters, they'll try to engage your public service officials, but they would never get even a single response. What is key is communication, and not just a communication sometimes when the situation is worse, just to keep communities abreast on a perpetual basis.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid if we as communities don't rally behind each other, assist each other, the situation will only be exacerbated. The entrepreneurial efforts will just be in vain.
Okay.
It's so bad, Cathy.
Tabon Mafikeng, thanks for calling in on that issue. And one doesn't blame communities, right? Because there was a point where protesting yielded some form of positive result. At the very least, there was a time in this country when people would protest and they would know that there would be an official sent to receive their memorandum of grievances or whatever the case is. Today there are protests that take place and nobody bothers. Nobody bothers to show up. It's like the biggest blue tick ever. Communities being blue ticked. So Thabo, you don't blame people when they feel like, well, to what end will it be? Especially if the culture of ignoring issues prevails. Skara, you're in Bizana. You also want to talk about roads.
Yes, Casey. Morning, Casey.
Yes, go for it.
Yes, okay. There, I just want to report the bad state of the road now. That is linking town from Pongweni to town. You turn at the branch called Mtendo, right down, you link it to where Mandela's home is. No, Casey, no. Ngata, please, can you escalate this to Ngata, please? And then the Shengwa. I phoned him the other day, Shengwa, telling him about the state of the road here. No, it's so horrible.
What exactly is happening with that road, Skara?
Oh, so
just
bad.
In bad condition.
You can't even stick into your side. You're just breaking the road rules. If you driving through this road, and it's a busy road, it's linking the greater part of Bizana into town. No. When it is raining, the road is so much. You couldn't the kids, when they're going to school, they are so spilled over by the water on the road. We cannot even walk when it is raining.
Skara, do me a favor and also maybe send us pictures of the road, if you have any, next time.
Okay, I can.
Please.
A state where you have to wait for another car to pass, and then you drive smart through. No. It's so busy. There are schools, there's what and what in this road that is so neglected. No. It can't be like this. Where's Nata? What are they up to on Nata? No, I'm not Shengwa. Why they are in their holiday resort, these people, they are not working, these people.
All right, Skar and Bizana, we're going to...
No, escalate this thing. Tell them to come, and then we talk straight to them, these people. They are not working, these people.
Okay, Skara, I'm first going to try and track down which road it is. But I know that we did have some complaints last year about a road in Bizana as well. I have a funny feeling that you're talking about the same road. A very funny feeling that it might well be the same road. Peter, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. How are you?
Good.
I'm good. Cathy, you've just spoken to a guy, I think he said he's Tabo from Afike.
Yes.
I think he captured most of the things that I wanted to capture. But let's start here, Cathy. I'm in the scholar transport space. Government gives you a contract with an intention to set you up for failure. So that when you come back, they say, we did give you an opportunity and you did not perform. Now they would have given to those, because there are these big guys who will get the contracts. When you fail, they call that big guy to come in and step in. Now, the federal government is not afraid, especially transport. They are not afraid to owe you for 6 months. You call at Scholar Transport, you look for answers. No one can give you any answer. You end up driving there. Because if you call, they'll tell you, things that payment, and that payment, can you go and check? No, I can't go to payment. We are not allowed to go there. Can you give me the number at payments? No one can give you the number at payments. You drive there. They are not even going to take you to payment. You come out of Mazike and start getting answers to your questions. Let me tell you, Cathy. November, December, our drivers went home without being paid. In January, 3 days before the schools opened, they called a meeting and they said, no, we'll give you 2 months payments, please go to work. You must understand that these buses should have been taken care of, they should have been fixed. Diesel suppliers should have been paid, there are mechanics involved there that should have been paid. Those guys are not going to assist you if you have not paid them. Now, you give me 3 days to prepare my buses so that on Tuesday they can go and take the school kids to work. On Tuesday, they were telling us that some have been paid, some have not been paid. Now, the problem is, you have got a driver who was not paid in November, who was not paid in December. His children, what happened to his children in December? They did not get the Christmas clothing. They were not like the other kids. In January, they are going to school. They don't have the money. Their father has got to go back to work, but he leaves the children that do not have school books, school clothing, and everything at home. How is the state of mind of that driver when he goes back to work? There are issues of payments of accommodation for these drivers and secure accommodation for the drivers and the buses. Do you think that when that driver gets to his accommodation, they are going to be allowed to get in while there has not been payment for 2 months? In the Northwest, they give you a contract for compliance purposes so that they can say, no, we did give them we did give small business people an opportunity to run business. Yeah. But the intention here is to get you to fail, so that when there are complaints, they will say, no, we did give them an opportunity, but they did not perform. Just lastly, just yesterday, we received a WhatsApp message from a director, the director of scholar transport at the Department of Transport. The director is saying, you must go and work. If you are not going to work, you are going to be terminated. We don't care what the reason of you not going to work is. Now I must go and work when the buses still need to be fixed, when the people still need to be paid. So if my drivers go on strike because they have not been paid, then it means I'm going to be terminated. You see what I mean when I say they set you up for failure?
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah.
I think you've made the point very clearly, Peter, and that's part of the concern, right? That that people, in some instances, it seems, at least based on, like I said, this conversation we've been having, are being put in a position where they're set up to fail. And that, of course, is concerning too, because you have so many jobs on the line, because you have people's livelihoods affected so deeply. So, Peter, thank you for calling in with that perspective. And he's a scholar transport provider out in the Northwest Province. Brenda, you're in Polokwane. Good morning.
Morning, Cathy. How are you?
Good. Go for it, Brenda.
Yeah, I want to talk about Vodacom. You know, the tunes that you get from Vodacom on your phone without subscribing. And it's been happening to me for a few months now. Without you subscribing, and when you try to unsubscribe, there's a message saying that you didn't subscribe. But now my biggest problem is that when you recharge, money is taken away from your account. So I'm just frustrated about this because I went to the nearest branch of Vodacom. They couldn't help me. I don't know about these tunes. When someone calls me, they listen to the tunes, but I don't know about them. I never subscribe. So
yeah, but surely the Vodacom branch should have been able to help you unsubscribe, if nothing else.
They couldn't, or maybe they just didn't want to. So I'm not the only one. People around me, they're also experiencing the same thing. So I just came to put it here on the platform to say, how can you help us?
Okay. All right, Brenda. Brenda out in Polokwane. Maybe somebody else has some advice. You know those tunes, different music when people's dial tone, instead of it being the normal ring that you have, it'll be maybe some of their favorite artists that come on. Brenda says that's been happening to her, but she didn't subscribe for the service, and it does come at a cost, and now she's struggling to unsubscribe. If we have anybody from Vodacom that's listening, please call in. I don't even want to start with actually Vodacom, like service delivery, Vodafone. Terrible. Yes, I said it because that is my experience. It is atrocious. Anonymous, you're in Johannesburg. Good morning. Good morning, Anonymous.
Hi, Cathy. How are you?
Good. Go for it, Anonymous.
Yes. Cathy, you're speaking to Anonymous from Johannesburg, right? Cathy, I am a student at University of Johannesburg in the CPE, College of Business and Economics faculty. And we are under finance and investment. We are a group of students here. We were academically excluded in the university. We believe our exclusion is based on victimization because we have lodged a grievance with our HOD because we've been trying to resolve this with our program coordinator. The program that you are doing is Honors in Property Valuation and Management. So UJ brought a lecture to teach us Property Law A. It's Applied Property Law A and Applied Property Law B. From what we are hearing, this lecture was coming from finance, and she was actually hired to teach finance according to what we've got here when we did our own investigation. And apparently she could not be able to deliver on finance, and she was taken to our program. As to what criteria UJ followed, we do not know. Because what we have here, they have sent us the job spec when she was hired. But when it comes to us in the property space, we do not know how this lecturer was hired. And apparently, this lecturer, she brought someone into our class as a guest lecturer. And we've got it on record that the university did not know about this guest lecturer. So this lecture taught us most, I would say they were sharing classes 50-50, and we were tested most on the content that this so-called guest lecture taught us in class. So we've lodged a complaint with the HOD saying that we are not happy with the way that we are being taught. And the name of the guest lecture happened to appear because when we had consultation, the way in which she spoke to us, we didn't like it, because you are speaking as if you are a student that just finished matric and you are on a postgrad program here. Some of us work, and we've got families basically. So that's how the university.
So, but what were the reasons for your exclusion, Anonymous?
They are saying that we did not perform well, but now we are saying, but we've been complaining about this, that the way in which things are being done, it's not okay.
Yeah, but also, if we just look at the process academically, right, you're not going to be excluded off of just the one module or the one test that you fail. It has
Correct.
to be repeated bad performance. And so maybe just tell me exactly what happened there. Because exclusion is the last resort, right? It's the last action after a series of actions.
Correct. What happened is that when we started the program, if you are given an F7, you are given a chance to appeal, right? In my case, I've gotten an F7 because there was challenges that I've had. Then I've submitted a motivation as to why. Then I was accepted back to continue with my studies. But when I was accepted, now it happened that the university hired this lecturer, of which we've complained about the incompetency of the lecturer, as well as the guest lecturer who happened that the university didn't know about.
Is it everybody that on the program that has been excluded, or is it just a couple of you?
It's 15 of us, if I'm not mistaken.
In a class of how many?
I think the class, I think there's like 30 of us, if I'm not mistaken, 30 or 40.
Yeah, all right. Anonymous,
Yeah.
this does sound like one of those cases that is a bit more complex, right?
It is.
Yeah, it does sound like it's one of those cases that it's a bit more complex. I'm going to put you through back to Lebo. As you hear by Anonymous's own account, he had challenges before, and the university, he appealed, the university took him back. So, there clearly is a lot more going on than meets the eye with that particular matter. Okay, it is 10 o'clock, time for the latest news update. When we continue, Citizens Corner on the other side of this.
In our top stories, key issues expected to top the first cabinet Lekgotlha's agenda, and police probe discovery of a body found in Stilfontein. Good morning. Job creation, sustainable energy, reviving the country's economy, and the recent killing of the SANDF members in the DRC, among others, are set to top the agenda of the first Cabinet Lekgotla of the year, which starts in Pretoria later this afternoon. The two-day meeting comes at a time when there are serious tensions among some GNU partners over a number of bills which President Cyril Ramaphosa has enacted. The FF Plus has lobbied other parties to challenge the constitutionality of the Expropriation Act in the Constitutional Court, while the DA has lodged a formal dispute within the GNU. Ntebo Mukobo reports.
At least 10 parties in the GNU setup will meet at the Sefako Makhato Presidential Guest House this afternoon to outline government's main priorities for 2025. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the ANC's offering to the Lekgotla is to change the lives of South Africans for the better.
We need also to focus on addressing the basic needs of our people: health, education.
This first biannual planning meeting of the GNU executive for the year will be attended by ministers and their deputies, as well as premiers and directors general, among others. Its outcomes will form the basis of the State of the Nation address scheduled for next month.
Northwest Police have opened an inquest docket following the discovery of a body at Margaret Shaft in Stilfontein. This is one of the shafts which illegal miners used to emerge from underground between November last year and December at the height of the police operation Valamgoti. Northwest Police spokesperson Brigadier Sabata Mukhabone elaborates.
The body suspected to be of an illegal miner was retrieved from Margaret Shaft in Stilfontein. According to information, the body, which was already in a state of decomposition, was discovered by the shaft security personnel who were sweeping level 16 of the shaft. The cause of the death is still unknown, and inquest docket has been opened for investigation.
Residents in Mpumalanga have expressed concerns over the disruption to their daily commute after over 50 Putco buses were torched at various depots in the province on Monday. With the buses out of operation, residents are now forced to rely on more expensive taxi services, placing a significant financial burden on them. Frustrated residents echo their sentiments.
For now, as we have to go to work, buses are even more reasonable because now taxis are charging double the amount that the buses charge. So it's very hard for us to go to work, especially from this side of Mpumalanga going to.
The people who ban those buses, we are wishing the law must do their work and they must arrest them so that PATCO can continue on the road freely.
Treatment Action Campaign says more than 20,000 South African healthcare workers face potential job losses following the US government cuts to aid funding for international development. The community-led HIV and TB organization says US President Donald Trump's administration cut ties with the NPOs after providing over 6.5 billion rand in aid in the fight against HIV, TB and other diseases. Treatment Action Campaign Director Mark Haywood says work has already stopped at their branches.
I think behind the scenes the National Department of Health is doing things. Unfortunately, the National Department of Health hasn't yet issued a statement about this. The national government hasn't issued a statement about this, which is unfortunate, I think, because it's just leaving a lot of people not knowing what is going on. I plead that today the National Department says something and that it gives people some certainty and some relief that their HIV treatment services are going to continue, but also the people who are employed through these programs are going to continue to be employed, perhaps through funding from the government.
And finally, the US Secretary of State has urged Rwanda's President Paul Kagame to ensure an immediate ceasefire in the Democratic Republic of Congo. M23 rebels supported by Rwanda are reported to have captured almost the whole of Goma, the biggest city in the eastern DRC. Earlier at the UN Security Council, leaders condemned Rwanda's support for the rebels. The DRC's Foreign Minister Therese Keyakwamba Wagner called on the Security Council to bring an end to the conflict.
Millions have been displaced, thousands are trapped in the besieged city of Goma with restricted access to food, water, electricity, security. Countless lives have been lost. Enough is enough. Rwanda cannot be allowed to continue to act with impunity, and I therefore called on the Council to act in defense of the principles of multilateralism and international law.
Recapping the top story, job creation, sustainable energy, reviving the country's economy, and the recent killing of the SANDF members in the DRC, among others, are set to top the agenda of the first Cabinet Lekgotla of the year, which starts in Pretoria later this afternoon. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
Compliments for 2025, Mangani. Call me Mabel Goals because I'm coming for it all this year. Body, relationship, and financial goals. With my Just Invest account, financially I'm cruising. 2 more to go. You know any available Prince Charming voice, man?
I've got you, Mabel. Sorienga. Mara, you can also be like Mabel and earn up to 8.25% in interest to start the year right. Open yours via the Money app today. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. Promo rates apply. Go to nedbank.co.za for more information.
The Toffees are well aware that only maximum points will help them out of the bottom half.
Lewin, great feat, brilliance, absolutely superbly done. Calvert-Lewin for Everton.
Meanwhile, the Foxes believe they are in dire need of victory to run away from trouble.
It's Jordan Ayew, back in goal, Jordan Ayew scored for Leicester City, and those Leicester fans are celebrating wildly.
This is the Premier League. Experience the superb contest, Everton FC versus Leicester City FC, on Saturday 1 February at 4:30 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point, 8 after 10 o'clock. Welcome to the second hour of the show. Coming up on the show this hour, for Citizens Corner today, we're going to focus on public health treatment programs. And this is in light, right, of the latest freeze on aid coming out of the U.S. We're really going to try and unpack what the significance of this for a country like South Africa is. And it's clear to, it's important to highlight that it's not just South Africa that is being affected by this freeze. You know, it's been a holistic freeze affecting many different countries across the world. But South Africa, as the country dealing with the biggest burden of HIV/AIDS, of course, is significantly impacted because a portion of that funding ended up with us, and in terms of funding our certain programs within our own country. So we'll unpack that over the next hour and what then it practically means for the millions of people living with HIV in this country, and what they can expect in terms of changes. That's the conversation we'll have. Before we get to it, lots of your voice notes from the open line. We'll just recap a couple and then get into our conversation for the day.
Good morning, Cathy. It's Mtundeben here. Cathy, regarding to the issue of the east of DRC in the Goma region, I must say it's really frustrating. And listen to Ubabusbu giving all that explanation and that information. I must say it's really frustrating. But in the other side, when I was listening to that general of the South African Defence Force on the update at noon with Sekene Kamwendo, like I've learned, he was keep on saying that some of the information they cannot able to disclose due to the security reason. So I think us, even though we are so eager to know what's going on there, but some of the things they cannot able to disclose to us. And I had an opportunity today to ask my neighbor some of the things which is taking place there, of that nature. Like I was so shocked on how it's being done.
Good morning, Cathy. Trevor here from the Eastern Cape. Cathy, I know we're not on this topic, but I just wanted to mention this. You know, it's so unfair of Eskom to expect us that have now put on solar panels to register with them. Why? Do they now understand? Do they expect us to pay them now a levy? We had to take out thousands of rands out of our savings. We had to borrow money to put on solar because we were tired of load shedding and of the problems that Eskom were giving us. It's so unfair, you know what? It's so unfair. And I think it's something will have to be done about this. Thank you, Cathy.
Good day, says Cathy. Says Cathy, what do we do when the world is in such much chaos? Who do we turn to? Do we turn to our politician? Do we turn to the science of this world? What the professionals of this world? What do we do at this moment and point in time of life? There's only one way to go: turn back to God, and that's the only way the world will come out of this chaos. Other than that, a lot is still going to happen, and we're still going to have more and more of these wars and chaos in the world. And with bus service, Cathy must check also the Great North in Limpopo. It's a mess. It's a mess. It's a mess. Thank you, Gwena.
Good morning, Cathy and the SAFM listeners. Cathy, on the subject of entrepreneurship, the caller who just called made me even more confused. It's not so long ago, my brother tells me, saying to me, you are not an entrepreneur yourself, mainly because I do not have employees. So he says an entrepreneur is someone who is having employees and people working for him. So, but now I'm more confused because I'm not working for the government. I'm providing a transport service. So can we just get someone to explain these things? Because I hear one caller saying, if you're a middleman, you're not an entrepreneur. If you're producing something in the market, then only then you can be regarded as an entrepreneur. Thank you. It's Suli here from Pretoria.
Good morning, SAFM. Cathy, can you please put Mantsopa local municipality on a spotlight in the next or during this year, please? Hey, that municipality, I can just forward you the water that people are drinking that site.
All right, thanks for those WhatsApp voice notes that you've sent through on the show, reflecting on just some of the issues we touched on in the open line. Well, let's get then straight into our Citizens Corner. Just this past week has seen major changes in international grant funding, especially in the public health sector. US President Donald Trump signing an executive order halting the payment, this is of existing and new foreign aid projects over the next 90 days. Trump also signing an executive order to withdraw the U.S. from the World Health Organization in the next 12 months. Now, the U.S. is the largest contributor to the WHO. In South Africa, one of the biggest ways we've benefited from foreign aid from the U.S. is through PEPFAR. It has contributed to 17% of the National Department of Health's budget of 44 billion rand towards HIV and TB programming. Joining us for this conversation is Fatima Hassan, founder of the Health Justice Initiative. Fatima, good morning.
Good morning. Great to be on the show, Cathy.
Anele Yawa, the General Secretary of the Treatment Action Campaign. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Cathy. Good morning to Comrade Ras and Comrade Fatima.
And Russell Rensburg is the Executive Director of the Rural Health Advocacy Project. Russell, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning to the listeners, and good morning to my colleagues and comrades on the call.
Before we get into the conversation, I want to start by laying the groundwork, playing a clip of the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, who was responding to the announcement of this freeze on funding and detailing how we as a country are going to be affected.
We have been fighting the scourge of HIV, AIDS, TB and malaria together for more than 20 years. as a global community and depending very much also on global funding. But on the South African side, the total amount spent in this campaign is 44.4 billion rand, and PEPFAR contributes 17%. The rest is mostly our own fiscus and some other funders like Global Fund. Where are we going to be affected? PEPFAR has got a presence and is helping us in 27 districts out of the 52 districts of South Africa. These are the 27 most affected districts in the country. 5 in the Eastern Cape, 2 in the Free State, 4 in Gauteng, 7 in KwaZulu-Natal, 2 in Limpopo, 3 in Mpumalanga, 3 in Northwest, and the Cape Metro in the Western Cape. We're still having meetings about this to try and compile to find out exactly how much is the weight of the problem on our shoulders. We had arranged a meeting with the Minister of Finance. Unfortunately, it was postponed. But I must also add, most of the people who are funded from PEPFAR are the ones who told us that they've been written letters to stop because of the review. We as a government, we have not as yet received any letter whatsoever.
All right, so that then being the comment from the health minister, it sounds very much like these are uncertain waters, Fatima, in terms of what the future holds. Perhaps speak to us about what is happening within the health community right now, and specifically those NGOs that are receiving monies directly from PEPFAR.
Thanks, Cathy. So I think you're right. It's absolute chaos out there. There's a lot of misinformation and also missing information in terms of the full consequences and impact of not just the 90-day review, but also the stop work order. And things are moving so fast that overnight, the Secretary of State in the U.S., Rubio, has now issued a further waiver in relation to the stop work orders and the executive order that President Trump of the U.S. issued a few days ago on assuming office. And that now includes the possibility for all of the clinics, for all of the NGOs that have been receiving PEPFAR funding or likely to receive further funding, they will now be able to provide what's called life-saving humanitarian assistance, which includes core life-saving medicines, medical services, and a range of other services. There are exclusions contained in this waiver that's just been issued a few hours ago, but it does provide that life-saving humanitarian assistance can continue or can resume. But the ideological exclusions that originally prompted the executive order from Trump, as well as the withdrawal from the WHO, the World Health Organization, does still include some exclusions which won't be allowed or possible for the next 90 days. And I can take you and the listeners through that shortly.
I think it'll be important for you to highlight for us, Fatima, what then the significance of this waiver is in light of the executive order. So where does this leave things now? For many of the NGOs, of course, who are wondering, well, what are they going to do? And are they still going to be receiving funding over the next 3 months?
So what Rubio has done a few hours ago in the so-called temporary waiver, because of the chaos that had been created in the last 72 hours, in the last few days, is that any activities or clinics or NGOs that are providing services that involve termination of pregnancy, what they're calling family planning conferences, diversity exclusion, inclusion programs, gender programs, transgender surgeries, or what they're calling non-life-saving assistance, that can't be provided. So those clinics that are providing those types of services or NGOs are not included in the waiver. What's included in the waiver from a few hours ago, like I've mentioned, is that you can continue providing life-saving medicines, food, shelter, subsistence assistance, as well as supplies and reasonable administrative costs. Now, I'm just quoting from the actual waiver. it's still very unclear. The language is not helpful, and there's still going to be significant exclusion. So overnight, and I'm sure Russell and Anele will also amplify on this, overnight we've had reports of sex worker clinics, of clinics providing services for men, services providing to people who are LGBTIQ, who are being temporarily closed down in South Africa. We've had the minister talk about the number of facilities and districts that are affected by this particular chaos that has been created by the Trump administration. Our reports, and this has to be verified, obviously, and it would be helpful if the Department of Health could actually issue more clearer information, is that at least 20,000 staff or workers in South Africa are affected by these orders and the confusion. And I think this is why, even though the minister has indicated in the report that you just played, that we are only, in inverted commas, only reliant on PATFA for 17% of our expenditure, that's still a 7.5 billion rand gap, which we believe as civil society Treasury has to come forward with an urgent undertaking to ensure that nobody stops their work and that services can continue. Because remember, we are not the USA. We have a constitution, we have certain rights are guaranteed, we're a sovereign nation, and our health services and provision of counseling, of prevention, of screening, of treatment, of HIV testing, of TB work, of HIV work should not be dictated by the ideological framework and policies of the U.S. government. We've also heard overnight that this is affecting staff at the NHLS, the National Health Laboratory Service. So, of course, you know, in your earlier question, you said, what is the impact? The impact is massive. It's not just about ARV clinics. It's about the entire ecosystem of health services that need to be provided to our people.
Anele, let me bring you in here and give you a chance then to speak on number one, just the impact of this news. Of course, you as the Treatment Action Campaign have started coming out with numbers in terms of what this is actually going to cost with the programs that are currently being undertaken. But once you're done with that, if you can then also speak to the issue of the waiver and if it does present some kind of lifeline.
Okay, thank you, Cathy, and good morning to the listeners at home. So, the impact of this, it shows us that we are in a state of disaster as the country in terms of our response to HIV and AIDS, because one will remember that these NGOs had hired a lot of healthcare workforce, and these healthcare workers were working in our clinics and they were complementing the staff in our clinics. Now that this stop work order was issued, all of them were instructed to go back home and they were laid off for the next 90 days. What does that mean? It means, therefore, that in our clinics we will have a huge shortage of human resources. And as a result of that, it means the majority of the public healthcare workers will experience a worse situation of waiting long hours because of insufficient staff, but also people who were collecting treatment in the external pickup points, like your pharmacies and all what have you, were told that they were given until yesterday to collect their treatments, and it therefore means those who didn't have an opportunity to go and collect their treatment from these external pickup points will be forced to go to our clinics. It therefore means our clinics will be congested again. It therefore means all other services that were provided at community level, because these NGOs, some of them had mobile clinics that were reaching out to our communities to provide a lot of health services. It therefore means, as from yesterday, there were no services which were rendered at community level. I'm sure you saw an article from the Daily Dispatch about 120 women who were turned away because of non-availability of these clinics at Vergenoeg that were providing both HIV, TB, and aid services at community level. And then so it therefore means that the impact will be very, very dire, and it will affect the majority of people who are stable on treatment and who might, some of them, disengage from care because of congested facilities, because of long waiting hours, because of health facilities that do not have adequate healthcare workers. But also in terms of the waiver, we do not know what the details of this will mean, whether they will mean that all these healthcare workers from these NGOs that were laid off due to the stop work order will be returned back to work in order for them to continue to provide services they were providing in our country. And in conclusion, Katie, we are calling upon the Minister of Health to engage with the Minister of Finance, with Treasury, in order for the Treasury to uplift the austerity measures within the healthcare sector. We are calling upon the Treasury and the Minister of Finance, including the entire cabinet of the Government of National Unity, to put more resources in our health care or NGOs in order for us as the country to be able to address the situation we are faced with at the present moment. And in doing so, it will therefore mean that as the country, we do not drop the ball in our response to HIV. And you must remember that already in South Africa, we have an estimated number of about 1.1 million people who were on treatment and who have disengaged from care, that we still need to go at community level to trace and track them in order for us to be able to link them back to care and restart the treatment. And if now we are faced with this, it will therefore mean it will add more numbers on the numbers that we have of people who have disengaged from care.
Anele, what has struck me is just the pace at which things have happened. It was just, 2 days ago that this announcement came out, and you already are talking about services that are being closed off, clinics that have shut their doors. Why has there been just such a quick turnaround, a quick response?
It is because, as I indicated earlier on, that these NGOs which are getting funding through CDC, USAID, have employed staff in the form of your nurses, your clinicians, your pharmacists, your data capturers, your control care workers, and these people are deployed both in our clinics and in our communities, and each of them are linked to a certain clinic. So immediately when this stop work order was issued to these NGOs then communicated with their staff at clinic level and at community level. And because TAC is a community-based organization with the majority of its members being public health care users, our comrades were able to get this information based on what they experienced at clinic level in terms of services that were not provided the way they were provided, and also they were able to get the first-hand information directly from these healthcare workers who were like, we were told to go back home, because some of them received their communication whilst they were already at facility level and they had to leave as per the instruction from heads of their NGOs.
Sure, yeah, quite a concerning situation. We're going to continue this conversation in a moment. Russell will also give you a chance to weigh in. So you heard there practically what the consequences of this decision has been. It's not something that is still going to happen, but it has already begun to filter down. Services, in some instances restricting their services, in other instances completely closing off those services because of this order. And we'll have to then try and understand what it's going to mean for the broader ecosystem in as far as those who do need treatment, who do need those services are concerned. It's now time for your latest news update. It's 10:30.
Thank you, Cathy. In the news headlines on SAFM, I am Onde Lambana, and a very good morning Job creation, sustainable energy, reviving the country's economy, and the recent killing of the SANDF members in the DRC, among others, are set to top the agenda of the first Cabinet Lekgotla of the year, which starts in Pretoria later this afternoon. Northwest Police have opened an inquest docket following the discovery of a body at Margaret Shaft in Stilfontein. This is one of the shafts which illegal miners used to emerge from underground between November 2024 and December at the height of police's Operation Vala Umkodi. And the National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union is today expected to submit a memorandum of demand to the National Treasury and South African Reserve Bank in a bid to prevent the impending liquidation of Itala Bank. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
I feel great, I feel nice.
Also, what's the goal with coiling on the highest, the summer level? What are we? Generations the legacy. Kabisi's call for Kumo's side eye. That quasha of the drama context. It's churchy Christmas vibes. It's the core on SABC Plus. Don't miss Generations the Legacy at 8 weekdays on SABC 1. Zanti for sure.
If you think you cannot afford a lawyer, think again. Clientele Legal has made professional legal services affordable for you. Whether it's a civil, criminal, or labor-related matter, we have a nationwide panel of attorneys standing by to assist you. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195 and we'll call you back. Clientele General is a licensed non-life insurer and an authorized FSP. Standard rates and terms and conditions apply. The National Pulse, weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
How long would it take for, as you said, if you make contact with the generals in the DRC, how long would it take for them to either have a phone call with you or WhatsApp call?
It's important to talk to the minister and the chief of the National Defence Force because they were in Goma. They visited the camps, they met with all the officers involved, they have a report with them. We should try to ensure that there is a clear line of communication with us so that we don't receive many stories, because the most important thing is not only to know what happened, the most important thing is to know what is being done to ensure that our soldiers on the ground are fully equipped, they have got sufficient equipment and other material support.
Malusi Gigaba was the co-chairperson of Parliament's Joint Standing Committee.
This is SAFM. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on the Talking Point, 33 after 10 o'clock. For Citizens Corner today, we're looking at the impact of the withdrawal of funding in as far as PEPFAR is concerned for our Citizens Corner. Fatima Hassan, founder of Health Justice Initiative, is one of our guests, alongside Anele Yawa, the General Secretary of the Treatment Action Campaign, and Russell Rensburg, who is Executive Director of the Rural Health Advocacy Project. Russell, I think this is a good time to bring you in as well, to weigh in on the impact. And again, listening to this conversation and listening to the input that both Fatima and Anele have given, it is frightening the pace at which things have changed. And we know that those that are on medication on a month-to-month basis. So if one sees the executive order, and one would have thought that maybe by the time we get to end of April, then we'll start seeing the impact of it. But the immediacy of it all, that's quite scary.
Yeah, I think that's the nature of an executive order, and probably something that the U.S. legislators would need to think about. But coming back to our shows, and I think thank you for playing the clip from the minister. South Africa has really done well over the last 20 years, particularly in responding to HIV after a slow start, right? And I think we've achieved some great results, and we're one of the few developing countries in the world that funds a large portion, or the largest portion of its own response. But we are at a critical moment in the epidemic, right? And the impact of this executive order for the 3 months and beyond is significant. So firstly, I think one of the things that we committed to as a country on World AIDS Day last year was to re-engage or at least re-enroll an additional 1 million people onto life-saving ARVs. Right? That was part of a joint announcement that we had made with our development partners at that point. This could be impacted by that. The second component to that, and I think this is an area that Fatima knows well, is around access to long-acting PrEP, right? So there's a new injection or HIV prevention injection that's out there. South Africa was scheduled to roll that out. Also with the support from our development partners, this could again impact that. But I think the important conversation or the opportunity and crisis that it presents, that it happens in South Africa at a time where fiscal space is shrinking, right? Over the last 10 years, our revenue our growth has literally been within the 1%. As a result of that, our spending on healthcare has been constrained. When you add things like salary increases, inflation, medical inflation and the like, in real terms, we have less money than what we had 10 years ago. And now to have this sudden transition away from a long-standing development partner relationship places pressure on our financial sustainability. Luckily, or unluckily, I don't know, the cabinet is meeting in Lekgotla this week. And I think it's an opportune time for us to start talking about the sustainable financing of the South African health response and what are the things that we have to do over the next 3 years to ensure that we mitigate the impact of these kind of global shifts, which in my view will probably deepen. And I think we must pause for a moment as well. South Africa, again, is very lucky to be able to fund a large portion of its response. That is less so in the countries that surround us. I'm thinking Swaziland, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, where almost 75% of the health response is actually funded through these bilateral agreements. We saw in the early days of HIV that could put pressure on our systems as well, right? So we could have a massive increase in demand in areas like Mpumalanga, Limpopo, northern KwaZulu-Natal, and elsewhere as people look to seek treatment. So this is a massive crisis that's brewing. I think I don't know enough in terms of what's happening in the bilateral discussions between the organizations funded by PEPFAR. I understand the government's inability to know how much is affected because a lot of those relationships are on an organization to PEPFAR level rather than with the government directly. But I do think this is a critical point for us to sort of put sustainable financing back onto the table, self-reliance back onto the table. And as these conversations grow, I expect our government to come up with a plan on donor transition so that we are less susceptible to these kind of risks. On the waiver, I don't really want to talk too much on that. But what's interesting from that, given the level of response and the level of resources that are invested in access to treatment in South Africa, hypothetically, a lot of our organizations who work funded by those programs often work on complementary programs that are at greater risk, particularly populations responses to key population. So we need urgent action. So in addition to the government meeting, I also think that we need all the implementers to meet and come together and then engage government on a transition plan or an emergency support plan that ensures that people can remain on treatment and that we maintain our momentum. But these are very, very difficult times, Cathy, and I expect it to get worse. So my view is really we need to have a conversation around sustainable financing. Like Anela said, right now, health may need a bailout. If we can find R1 billion to secure a failing business like ArcelorMittal for 100,000 jobs, surely we can find the additional money to be able to manage this transition. After the 3 months, we also don't know how many organizations will still get grants. Contractually, they could end grants, they could reduce grants. So I think that scenarios need to be mapped out now, and we need to start talking about how do we manage the transition. So in our view, this is totally unprecedented. It's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility, and a lot of fear, right? And I think we need to get sober minds around the table and try and understand how do we manage the impact of it. Government can't do it alone. We need all of the different partners to come together to have a conversation on, firstly, on a transition plan, and in the long run, a sustainable health financing plan. I think there's also a need to start looking at the global health architecture. That one country is such a big supporter, and with the slip of a pen can end programs globally. This covers Asia, Africa, everywhere, and then there's other risks to things like the Global Fund, where the US is also a big supporter. So I think we need an urgent plan, not just for the immediate, but also over the near term, in terms of how we better manage and better work towards rejigging the global health infrastructure, as well as looking at how do we do transition plans over the next year to 3 years to be more self-sustainable.
Sure.
I know it's going to be hard. But that's kind of what's on the table for us right now. Because we're the price takers here. We can't control what the US government does. But we can control what we do here.
Fatima, this idea of a transition, it of course is a transition that is taking place on the go. And one wonders what needs to happen here and now. Anele made the example earlier of services in communities that are being cut as we speak. So what should realistically, what should the South African government be doing in this moment as a response to that?
Thanks, Cathy. I think there's a few things, and if we just, in answering that question, I have to take a step back, because our response to how we progressively realize the right to healthcare services in South Africa as we prepare, or as the Minister prepares for the implementation of NHI, has to be an understanding of the geopolitical crisis that we're in, that Russell has so carefully, summarized and articulated. And so we are operating in a global environment where you have administration in the US, which is a significant funder and controller and influencer of health policy around the world, as well as in the provision of services, that is veering towards an anti-science, anti-evidence, and highly ideological position that is often at odds with what public health demands and what scientific evidence is confirming and showing. It started with the global gag rule. You can see it in the language of the executive orders around the withdrawal from the WHO, around the stop work orders, around the ideological exclusions, even in the current waiver, right? So what is clear in the executive orders is this idea of one man's foreign policy, and that is the president of the U.S. And his foreign policy will determine not just our whole future in relation to health, but also in education and in relation to climate change, because this is not just always limited to health. It's also impacting climate change, it's also impacting education, it's impacting a range of other services. Now, the problem that we face, and I think it's telling that this panel has 3 civil society advocates, is that to a large extent we've been informed that government officials, as well as those who are implementers of these PEPFAR programs, cannot speak publicly. They are currently censored by this administration, and they are worried that after 90 days their agreements will not be renewed. So there's a chilling effect currently with these executive orders. So to be able to collate the proper information, which is one of the most urgent things we need to do as a country, is going to be very difficult unless people are given an undertaking that they can speak on a confidential basis. So it's putting at odds how you determine the future of health and health policy in a context of fear, as Russell and Anele have pointed out, of uncertainty, and also where there could be contractual consequences. So when you say what needs to happen towards a transition to self-reliance, our government has to understand that. And within understanding that and dealing with that reality, and obviously they worried about AGOA, they worried about their relationship with the U.S. at the WTO, and we saw that in COVID. I mean, there's many other factors that they are probably dealing with. They're going to have to figure out what is a reasonable plan to step in and make sure that there isn't a massive hemorrhaging of health services in South Africa because of this decision of PEPFAR, but also because of their decision, in our view, to underfund health services through austerity. So currently on the table, we know 20,000 jobs at stake. The staff at the National Health Laboratory Services, at clinics, at NGOs, special projects. We have U.S.-funded technical support being provided to essential drug programs for the Department of Health around the selection of key medicine. So the support goes further than just the provision of ARVs at a particular clinic. They're involved in testing and screening. The global concern currently in the Global South is that apparently all the data sets, so it's our patients' information around their health status, have been closed off and people can't get access to what's called the PEPFAR data sets. The technical capacity is being limited. The staff are being told to go away and that they have no jobs, and that there's also this current review of agreements. So self-reliance is going to take a Herculean task, but I think it's important for South Africa because if you want to implement NHI, you can't continuously be reliant on not just the US, but also the EU or any other government's benevolence or their donations or their charitable programs, which, as Russell and Anele have pointed out, are subject to the whims of a president that gets elected every few years. And obviously there's going to be, a to and fro between the Democrats and the Republicans in the U.S., and that creates uncertainty for South Africa. But part of that conversation around self-reliance, how much money we're spending, where we're getting our support from, is that our government also needs to understand that it can take measures right now to reduce the price of medicines, to reduce the price of health products so that we wouldn't have to be spending so much money. But again, because of U.S. interests in particular, and because they are scared of taking on pharmaceutical power, we're paying really high prices for key ARVs, for PrEP, for pre-exposure prophylaxis, for TB medicines, because there hasn't been the political will in South Africa, despite the intention to move forward to NHI, to actually take on the greed of, several role players in the health sector. So I think it's when we talk about a whole of government approach, so how are we going to reduce our health expenditure, but provide more services to more people, and how are we going to step in because of the chaos and the breach that has been caused by these executive orders and this temporary partial waiver. Those, I think, are the types of considerations that we're going to have to urgently address, because the failure to do so means that it's going to be even more difficult to implement NHI in a cost-effective manner, and it's going to severely disrupt and interrupt, in effect, South Africa's HIV treatment program, which, as you'll remember, only came about because of the activism of people living with HIV in our country. I mean, we also went through an anti-evidence, anti-science administration. It is possible to overcome it, but currently we now have to challenge that of another government, and I think that's going to be the difficult part.
Anele, the timing of this, I don't think that there would necessarily be a good time, but I would want to say that it couldn't have been worse because it comes towards the last quarter of our financial year, and we know that this is often when government departments, by and large, have spent the bulk of their budgets. Realistically, what are you expecting then to happen in the next month or two? I don't even know if we're at a place where we can be speaking about the next 3 months, just given the fact that it's still very much being caught up in the motions of trying to make sense of the information and what's coming out of the US and the subsequent consequences of that.
Yes, this has happened at a very awkward moment where, if you remember, as TAC on the 1st of December, we have marched and called upon the Deputy President and the Minister of Health to ensure that all people living with HIV and who are stable on treatment must be started on the 6 multi-month dispensing of medication. And then we think that what needs to happen in the next 3 months is for the Minister of Health to reason with the Minister of Finance, Treasury, the Cabinet, including the President, to say, let's apply and employ all strategies and measures that we have applied and employed during the time of COVID, and ensure that our priority is about saving the lives of the people, because if we are going to continue like this for the next 3 months, there is a great possibility that many people living with HIV who are stable on treatment might go without medicines, or might go to clinics and not get services as expected. And what will that mean? It will mean many people will disengage from care. And when people are disengaging from care, they will develop resistance because of defaulting from treatment, and there is a great possibility of high number of new HIV infections, because if those people are unable to be on treatment, the virus will not be suppressed. And if those people are sexually active, it therefore means they will be in a position of transmitting HIV to others. And if, as a country, we really want to save lives, it is important that we take some stopgap measures. As I indicated earlier on, that the Treasury needs to uplift the austerity measures on health, put more money on health in order for our healthcare system to be able to have more capacity in terms of human resource, in terms of the availability of medicines, in terms of ensuring that nothing is going to stop because of this. But in the main, as Ukombe Fatima is saying, it is important for our country to take this as a lesson and ask ourselves, how do we ensure that we are self-reliant as a country in our response to HIV, and make sure that we use the available resources in the country. And if then is there any other assistance which comes from other countries, it comes as an addition to what we are already able to provide as a country, instead of depending too much from the foreign aid. Thank you.
Russell, just hearing that, of course, then is also the concern about how far back this could set us if not managed well. So if those funds don't become available, if nothing is done effectively in the next 3 months, we could well be finding ourselves taking very serious steps backward in as far as the progress we have made when it comes to the management of HIV/AIDS in this country.
No, absolutely. Look, on my end, I like in the discussions and stuff that we had with some parties related to this, I think in the short term, treatment will be they'll do everything to ensure that treatment continues to be available. Right? I think the biggest challenge we face now is the plans that we had going forward and finding the money to do that, particularly on HIV prevention. Right? In terms of and if I'm honest, my biggest concern at the moment is with our neighboring countries, right, and the impact that it will have on those health systems, and what we as South Africans can do through our work in the European Union, in the African Union and elsewhere, that we can see how we mitigate this continentally, right? Because the impact in sub-Saharan Africa of HIV is significant, right? And any drawback and breakdown in those programs will have rollover effects to other regions. And South Africa could be at the fulcrum of all of that. So we need to figure out what our funding needs are on the specific priorities around TB. We have to get part of the conversation around what are the things that are urgent and what are the things that are important. And the only way we can do that is through dialogue, right? And I'm going to reiterate the point that we have control of what happens here. We don't really have control of what happens elsewhere. And I think by what's happening here, the cabinet can show leadership and responsiveness and work out a clear plan to support the emergency, as well as think forward on how we develop a more sustainable transition health financing plan. And that includes Treasury coming to the party around determining which health priorities we should fund, because the priorities are many. And I think what this does for us now is that the absolute minimum that we need to do at the moment is increase funding to district health services, to create opportunities to fund those workers working within our system, even on a temporary basis, and ensure the continued availability of drugs. Right? That in the short term is what we should be doing. But in the longer term, we need a more comprehensive plan, and I hope that the cabinet and as well as the broader health stakeholders are willing to come back to the party, because I know we had a financial sustainability plan on donor transition tabled by SANAC at least 2 years ago. And I think it's time to have a look at that plan again and see what urgent measures we need to make. Because really, we can't really do anything about what happens in America. They're a sovereign country. They make decisions that have an impact on us. But I think what we can control is the response.
All right.
And South Africa can provide leadership, and our partners, our comrades on this call as well. I think we all can work together and come up with a constructive plan. So my call to the government is call a meeting, and let's get everybody in a room. Let's create the priorities in the near term and in the medium term, and make sure that this doesn't impact access to treatment or detention and treatment, because we've come so far after a bad start. We can't afford to step back now. So
Dr.
that's what's at stake. So thank you very much for
Thanks,
the opportunity
Russell.
to speak to that.
Dr. Promise, you're calling from KZN. You believe that this could help create opportunities?
Yes, yeah. Good morning, kids, and to your guest. Yes. First, I'd like to say, to the TAC that we did not fight for the state. We didn't go to the state as TAC then for the state to go and beg for money to provide medication. Money for HIV medication should come from the fiscal, because we are full citizens, right? And then I think, there is a silver lining to this, because for me, this is the opportunity to hold the AIDS sector, research, treatment, activists, and AIDS money accountable. Because there are billions that are coming to the country, and people are just not accountable. The structures are not accountable. PEPFAR, you're talking PrEP, you're talking research. What is this research? Is it, ethical? Who is benefiting from the monetary, perspective? They're busy, integrating Depo-Provera to, ARVs, and they give this to black, poor women. Yet in the U.S. and everywhere else, people are suing for Depo-Provera. You have the Global Fund, in South Africa, for an example, billions, that are coming to the country. And these people are not accountable to the people or even Parliament. In the Global Fund, you have the CCM, which is, government and SANAC. They control who gets the money, but they're also, grantees and beneficiaries, at the same time. So for me, this is the opportunity for accountability. We have the TACs and the NAPWAs and the civil society, and from where I'm seated, they have become field workers. They create demand instead of asking tough political questions about accountability. So that's my contribution. As for the crisis, the state must find the 17%. It shouldn't have been, going abroad to raise this money anyhow. So that is my that is my take. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Dr. Promise. Annette, do you want to respond?
Yes, I hear what Dr. Promise is saying. And when we're talking about the civil society, we're talking about a broad church. And I agree with what the doctor is saying, but also it is important for us as the recipients of care to monitor services that are provided to us. And if you are not on the ground at the point of service and monitor whether services are provided adequately, it therefore means when we engage with duty bearers and those who are in authority, we need to be in a position to ensure that we use evidence-based and data-driven advocacy in order for us to be able to say, this is what is happening here and this is what is happening there. But also, it is important for all of us, like for instance in South Africa, we've got South African National AIDS Council, which is chaired by the Deputy President. We've got SANAC Civil Society and all other role players. It is important for us as SANAC, as a matter of urgency, to call an urgent SANAC plenary that will include civil society and all ministers and put our heads together around the table and come up with an emergency plan that will rescue the country from the quagmire that we are faced with now.
Anele, we'll leave it there on that note. Let me thank you for your contributions to this conversation alongside Fatima and Russell. So there you have it then. I hope that provides a bit more clarity in terms of where we are. If nothing else, a deeper understanding of just how affected our health system is by this decision and what we then as a country need to be doing in response. All right, it's 11 o'clock. Time for your latest news update.
Thank you, Cathy. Top stories. SANDF chief negotiator weighs on the DRC crisis and cabinet lekgotla to take place today. For SAFM News, I am Ondela Mbana and a very good morning. South African National Defence Union Chief Negotiator Jeff Dubazana maintains that SANDF budget cuts have negatively impacted their members. He was reacting to the deaths of 13 SANDF members in the DRC against the M23 rebels. Dubazana says government needs to take a decisive action and increase the department's budget.
We are highly disturbed by what's happening in the DRC. This whole thing started last week Thursday up until now, and nothing has been said from our leader. All this simply because of the budget cuts that the Defence Force have been experiencing for the past 2 decades. That is a very serious problem. You know, the cuts has a rippling effect in terms of the effectiveness of the Defence Force.
Job creation, sustainable energy, reviving the country's economy, and the recent killing of the SANDF members in the DRC, among others, are set to top the agenda of the first cabinet lekgotla of the year, which starts in Pretoria later this afternoon. The 2-day meeting comes at a time when there are serious tensions among some GNU partners over a number of bills which President Cyril Ramaphosa has enacted. The FF Plus has lobbied other parties to challenge the constitutionality of the Expropriation Act in the Constitutional Court, while the DA has lodged a formal dispute within the GNU. These partners are also poles apart on the Basic Education Amendment Bill and the National Health Insurance. Ndabu Mukobo reports.
At least 10 parties in the GNU setup will meet at the Sefako Makhato Presidential Guest House this afternoon to outline government's main priorities for 2025. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the ANC's offering to the lekgotla is to change the lives of South Africans for the better.
We need also to focus on addressing the basic needs of our people: health, education.
This first biannual planning meeting of the GNU executive for the year will be attended by ministers and their deputies, as well as premiers and directors general, among others. Its outcomes will form the basis of the State of the Nation address scheduled for next month. Ntebu Mokobo for SABC News.
Northwest Police have opened an inquest docket following the discovery of a body at Margaret Shaft in Stelfontein. This is one of the shafts which illegal miners used to emerge from underground between November 2024 and December at the height of police's Operation Vala Unkodi. Northwest Police spokesperson Brigadier Sabata Mukhabone elaborates.
The body suspected to be of an illegal miner was retrieved from Margaret Shaft in Stelfontein. According to information, the body, which was already in a state of decomposition, was discovered by the shaft security personnel who were sweeping level 16 of the shaft. The cause of the death is still unknown, and inquest docket has been opened for investigation.
The National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union is today expected to submit a memorandum of demand to the National Treasury and South African Reserve Bank in a bid to prevent the impending liquidation of Itala Bank. According to Nehau, the bank's more than 400 workers will be negatively impacted should the Prudential Authority's application succeed. The union's Durban Regional Secretary, Prince Mtalane, says they will also be going to court on an urgent basis that workers be paid their salaries.
Our primary concern is more than 400 workers that are employed by the institution, Itala Bank. As things stand now, none of them have been paid. Their salaries were supposed to be paid on the 20th of January. They still have not been paid. They've just been left in the dark. So our view is that the manner in which this was done in a very hasty manner, which has now affected hundreds of workers who have to feed their families, but now they have not received their salaries because all transactions that the organization would have done have been frozen.
Japan has recorded its highest number of child suicides for 45 years. The BBC's Chaima Khalil has the details.
National Police Agency statistics have shown that nearly 530 children died by suicide last year, with secondary school students accounting for most of the cases. The number tops the previous record high of 514 child suicides in 2022. Most cases were due to school-related issues, while more than 40 suicides. Meanwhile, government statistics show that the overall number of people taking their own lives in Japan fell to the second lowest figure since records began in 1978.
Recapping the top story, South African National Defence Union Chief Negotiator Jeff Dubazana maintains that SANDF budget cuts have negatively impacted their members. He was reacting to the deaths of 13 SANDF members in the DRC against the M23 rebels. I am Mondela Mora for SAFM News Headlines at 11:30.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
We definitely know what good insurance is. Our insurance don't delay when it comes to any claims. If something happens to one of our vehicles on the road, service delivery is the main thing.
They make sure that you are a satisfied customer from the beginning to the end.
It's definitely a win-win with our insurance.
Switch to business insurance today and you could get a massive 20% discount on your business insurance premium. SMS quote to 43328. That's quote to 43328 to switch and save today. Licensed insurer and FSP. TCs and information online.
Ever since Uspilion won 5,000 rand, 5 tower on Wheel of Fortune, he only wears white push-in sandals. Star white, Baba. And he owns 10 identical pairs. And before he did not even know the Queen's language. Now, Kalabo, wow. Chance, let's watch Wheel of Fortune weekdays, Monday to Friday at 7:30 on S3 and see how one spin changed Spillion's life and how it can change ours as well. In just one day.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
You come very much from a politically conscious family. You've been politically educated from a very young age, so you were well aware. And I wonder, as a young 19-year-old, what's going on in those moments?
I was 19 at the time. My mother had died 3 years before that. And so I was very much a depressed young person dealing with the idea of being alone in the world. At the time, my family didn't understand me, and so many people in my family were not even speaking to me. When I was 19 years old, I was kind of, what's that thing where they throw you out the family?
A black sheep, a loner?
Disowned. I was kind of disowned by my family. I had no one really. I was spending every birthday alone, every Christmas alone, Easter alone.
Miss Thandiswa Mazwai.
You are listening to The Full Circle. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za. SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
Hi, Cathy. I think this suspension of activities is going to undo a lot of progress that the country has done in the field of HIV prevention and also the rollout of ARV treatment. If you look at how the country has progressed or has tried to progress in terms of meeting the 95 targets, we've been struggling with the second and the third 95, which is ensuring that people are enrolled on treatment and also the third one that they are suppressed, virally suppressed. So if we have these hiccups, it's going to affect a lot in terms of achieving those 95 goals. So I think that the government should try to do something urgently so that we can be back on track. Thank you.
Hi, Cathy, Rudy. I think, thank you for your guest. Now, I think that in the short term, of course, this withdrawal from the WHO has an impact on Africa and South Africa specifically at an operational and treatment level and an access level. But I think the bigger question here is a far more decolonial agenda, in the sense of how do we construct finance systems for universal health coverage in the context of Africa's own health sovereignty and Africa's own health independence from, for example, the West. Now, there's a far more important discussion to have. In a sense, Trump's withdrawal is a fundamental blessing in disguise for Africa. As far as health is concerned, and perhaps even on the climate front, it provides another opportunity for Africa to step forward in a different way.
Good morning, SAFM. It's Anonymous from Mpumalanga. Yeah, it's really we're in crisis. So I believe that from now, as a country, regarding the issue of health care system, we need to be very careful and ensure that all the treatments and all the services that was provided under the PEPFAR, we need to monitor them strictly now. And it means that as a country, we need to look at our fiscus and ensure that now we move swiftly of not relying on other people, because it was clearly that shows that we are relying on US. So now we need to also sensitize our people, because people somewhere somehow others are not taking this issue of ARV very seriously. Like for an instance, then you find that treatment it's being given to the patients when the patients, maybe she's sick, doesn't take treatment. So, but if we can monitor those type of wasteful expenditures, maybe we can ensure that we manage our fiscus correctly. Thank you.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
Hey, want to check your TV license balance conveniently? Look no further. Our SMS service allows you to do just that. By sending a message containing your ID or TV license number to 44210, you can quickly access your balance without needing multiple inquiries or waiting on hold. Plus, standard SMS rates apply. Take advantage of this efficient method to stay informed and streamline your payment process today. T's and C's apply.
So why should I use We Buy Cars if I want to sell my vehicle?
Because We Buy Cars buys cars.
But will I get the right price?
Of course. We Buy Cars buys thousands of vehicles and knows exactly what every vehicle is worth. Their buyers deliver exceptional service and pay you immediately.
And how do I know what they'll pay for my vehicle?
It's easy. Visit webuycars.co.za or use the We Buy Cars app. Follow the simple steps and voila, you'll get a fantastic price for your car. We Buy Cars. Quick, easy, the best.
SABC CSI, in partnership with SAFM, will be giving away 20 laptops to Tetlanyo Secondary School in Kimberley on the 31st of January 2025. Tetlanyo Secondary School has been nominated by the SABC to receive 20 laptops after writing a donation request to enhance their ambitions to be 4IR compliant and increase the number of learners ready to participate fully and productively in the country's economy. Tune in to SAFM on the 31st of January and listen to The Talking Point, broadcasting live from the Tetlanyo Secondary School. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana, weekdays 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on The Talking Point. It's 13 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to the final hour of the show. Well, from health to education, that's where we're going to be focusing our attention over the next hour. And in particular, the funding of higher education. Many universities reopening their doors. And one of the issues that is coming up that many are dealing with is funding, right? How is the funding of these students going to take place? We've already started some of the conversations you may have heard with NSFAS, with student loans. What are the options that are available out there? Well, our next guest is the Vice Chancellor of Rhodes University, and he, alongside another colleague, making a strong argument around higher education, the need for it to be recognized as a public good, and that more money should be flowing into higher education. Professor Sizwe Mabizela, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to the listeners of SAFM.
Before we get into the argument that you are making around why higher education should receive greater funding, let's perhaps just speak about this period of the year and the perspective, at least from what is happening in your institution. Last week, yes, it was last week, Wits came on and told us that at the time that we were having the conversation, they had close on 120,000 applications, but would only be able to accept close on 6,000 students. What are some of those figures looking like from your end? And I wonder what kind of period you've been in the start of the year.
Cathy, Rhodes University has received thousands, tens of thousands of applicants, but we only have about 1,600 spaces for new first-time entering students. So we really can't accommodate the great number of young people who would like to access higher education.
Are we sitting with a good problem as a country? Is it good that we have so many young people qualifying to access universities than ever before?
Cathy, we should be excited as a country. The young people have done exceedingly well. And on behalf of Rhodes University, I would like to congratulate each and every one of those matriculants. We have improved the pass rate, and that is something that we can be proud of. And the number of young people who received a bachelor level pass increased quite substantially. So we must celebrate that. But there is a structural problem which we need to address as a country. Not everyone needs to go to university. We need the TVET sector to provide appropriate technical skills that can service our economy. This country needs more young people with artisanal skills than with university degrees. And that for me is really, really important. So we're really proud of what the young people have done, but I think we do need to address the structural problem regarding the post-school education pathways, because at the moment, university education is the only one that seems viable for most of them.
Not only the only one that seems viable, Prof, but it's what young people are told to aspire to, right? That is the benchmark, that when you are done with your schooling, if you're not able to get into university, then forget it. You have not done what you needed to do. So it's more than just, I suppose, the structural issue. It's also how we as a society socialize young people and what it is that they should aspire to in terms of their future and potential careers.
You're absolutely right, Cathy. I think we as a nation should be advocating for quality TVET education and make TVET education of choice for many young people in this country. And so we really need to address and change the mindset as a nation. Cathy, each engineer who is qualified at university will need about 5 or 7 technicians to work with him or her. So if we are not producing the kinds of skills that are essential to drive the economy of this country, we will not be able to address issues of unemployment, poverty, and hopelessness in this country. So it's something that we need to turn around. We need more young people entering the TVET sector. But before they can enter the TVET sector itself needs to be properly configured to provide quality training and education for young people so that they can want to go to it. We need a lot of technical skills, as I've indicated. This country needs more young people with artisanal skills than with university degrees.
Prof, just in the last hour, we've come out of a conversation focusing on what is the crisis really for the health sector following the withdrawal of funding by the US globally towards certain programs and initiatives. And we're coming into a conversation now where you, of course, are advocating for more monies to be put into higher education, that it should be seen as a public good. There are very competing interests, and all of them really very important. How should we be making some of these decisions, in your view, around what our budget spend is going towards, and how much of it is going towards certain items?
Cathy, we need skills. We need people with appropriate skills to drive the economy of this country. Many, if not most, of the other problems that we face require people who are equipped with knowledge and innovative skills that can address the challenges that we face. I mean, if you talk of health, for example, you need doctors, and those are produced by universities. As we have indicated, that higher education is a public good. The benefits of higher education do not simply accrue to the individual, but they also benefit the entire society. And therefore, investing in education, you are in fact investing in the future of this country. You are investing in people who will contribute to the economy, to the taxes, to the kinds of skills that will help address myriad of other challenges that we face in this country.
If we look at the current funding model for institutions of higher learning, you have public institutions subsidized by government. You have students that are then also those who qualify, at least, whose education is funded by NSFAS. You believe that the entire ecosystem just needs to change, that there really has to be a rethinking of how higher education is financed?
Yes, indeed. We do need to have a rethink on how we fund higher education. At the moment, we receive subsidies from government, so that is one part. The other part comes from student tuition fees. And in some instances, we are able to raise funds through third stream income. But it is really, really important that higher education is adequately funded to fulfill its mandate. What we are witnessing at the moment is the chronic underfunding and, in fact, the declining in the funding of higher education. And as a percentage of the GDP, the subsidies, government subsidies in higher education have been declining, and they are now closer to where we were in 2010, 2011. At the same time, there is an increase in the number of students who are accessing university education, which we are really pleased with. But the danger, of course, is that with the underfunding of higher education, we are not able to maintain the infrastructure that is required for quality learning and quality teaching, quality research, and so on and so forth. So we do need to have adequate funding provided to universities. And the call here is not just to our government and the public and the state. It is also a call to our private sector, because the private sector benefits hugely from the skills that which are produced by our higher education sector. And of course, we have the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, which is an important funding mechanism for those who come from poor and working class families. In our article, we have highlighted that there are significant challenges with NSFAS going forward. And that is something that needs to be addressed because we are worried about its sustainability. Just to indicate, Cathy, at the moment, NSFAS funds young people from families with a gross family income of 350,000 or less, which is a very low threshold. There is no mechanism to fund the so-called missing middle. Young people who come from families of civil servants, for example, whose income is just above the national financial aid scheme threshold. And they are destitute. We don't have any mechanism to fund those. But even with the NSFAS system, and this is where I think the nation needs to understand the importance of NSFAS and the extent to which it serves as a safety net from a social point of view. You will not believe that there are many young people who are NSFAS beneficiaries who use the allowances that they receive from NSFAS to support their families back home. And some of the problems, of course, is that they tend to look for accommodation further away from university in order to pay cheaper rent and save some money to send back home. That indicates the extent of poverty in this country and the need to have more safety nets for young people. Of course, it also serves as a useful mechanism to deal with issues of unemployment out there.
One of the other issues that you've highlighted is around declining quality. And that also is quite concerning because, a degree is only as good as the value that the market can attach to it. So if we are talking about decreased quality in as far as, infrastructure, resources available at institutions of higher learning, that very much has an impact on what a student can actually do with a degree that they received from whatever institution that they've graduated from. And you give the example of research and innovation and how Egypt has surpassed South Africa when it comes to research output. How concerned should we be about that? And where does this question around quality ultimately leave our graduates as a country? Because we're not just thinking about what we can do within our borders. We want to be globally competitive. We want to be able to send people into the rest of the world that we know are going to deliver at the same level.
Absolutely, Cathy. Quality is right at the core of higher education. If we are not able to provide quality and transformative education for the young people of this country, we would be doing them a huge disservice. Their prospects of employment would be diminished. And that is why we need to be sure that we fund higher education adequately so that universities are able to maintain the infrastructure that is required to deliver quality education. I must indicate, Cathy, that our public higher education institutions, our universities, are very, very competitive. However, we were raising a flag to say that if what is being suggested in terms of the austerity measures, that in the next medium-term expenditure framework, the percentage of higher education funding will decline from 2.2% to 0.78%, that the NSFAS funding will also decline by 5 billion rand. And at the same time, we are required to increase the enrollments in our universities. There's something that doesn't balance in the equation. Something will give. And the thing that will give is quality, because you will have more students in a lecture room which is not adequately equipped to provide quality education. And of course, quality research. If we are not able to provide equipment and facilities for our researchers to do the kind of research that makes a difference in the lives of our people and makes a contribution for the betterment of humanity, our degrees, our qualifications, the value thereof will be diminished and will be doing a huge injustice to the young people. And the Freedom Charter indicates our commitment to opening the doors of learning. Opening the doors of learning means ensuring that young people have access to quality education, not education of middling quality. And so it is really important that we provide adequate funding, that the young people access higher education, they receive that education that will make them contributing members of our society.
Sure.
That is really important for
Professor Sizwe Mabizela, we're going to continue the conversation in a moment. He's Vice Chancellor of Rhodes University. If you're listening in on this conversation, I wonder then what you make of it, in particular, just the need to restructure the funding for higher education, but also what is the impact, the implication of the current funding model, the gaps, the budget deficits, and the impact that has on our public institutions. It's time for your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Cathy. In the news headlines, South African soldiers deployed on a peacekeeping mission to the DRC are under-resourced. 13 SANDF soldiers have been killed in clashes against Rwandan-backed M23 rebels and the army. Disgruntled community members from Inanda are demonstrating outside the Nduzuma Magistrates Court demanding the release of 12 people who were arrested for allegedly hacking to death 5 people in the area earlier this month. And the National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union is today expected to submit a memorandum of demands to the National Treasury and South African Reserve Bank in a bid to prevent the impending liquidation of Itala Bank. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Top Sport with Michael Abramson.
2-all draw, 19th and Durban in relation to the Soweto derby. Let's see what you think about that.
I think the answer to the question, game between Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs that took place in Durban on the 19th of January. I think it was 2004, 2006, but be as it may be, the score was 2-all. I think Joseph Nyake also scored in that goal with his left leg.
I think the question is referring to the time when Simpus Mohlahlana was breaking the derby record of 19 games.
Let me give you the answer then tonight. I'm not going to hold it back for another night. I'll give you the answer. It was a match, I think it was 1997, but it was a 2-all draw. But the 19th, the clue of the 19th is the goal was scored in that match in the 19th second of the game. It's the fastest ever derby goal.
Top Sport on SAFM.
With Ford's Blue Sky offers, get a new Ranger XL from just $5,899 per month, including our optional service plan. 10% deposit, prime is 4.75%, 40% residual. Visit your trusted Ford dealer today for Blue Sky offers, where our Ford Family Guarantee comes standard. Limited time offer, while stocks last, T&Cs apply.
There will be joy and heartbreak at the Groenkloof Tennis Stadium in Pretoria. South Africa takes on Nigeria. The South is up against the West. This is the Davis Cup World Group 2 tie, the World Cup of tennis. Witness the spectacular tennis battle between South Africa and Nigeria on Saturday 1 February at 11 a.m. and Sunday 2 February at 10:30 a.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. You can also catch the Sunday action on SABC 3. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The SAFM Playwriting Competition is closing on the 3rd of February 2025. Explore the theatre of the mind and write your 60-minute radio drama play and email it before 5 p.m. on the 3rd of February 2025. Late submissions will not be accepted. For further information about the competition, visit safm.co.za or send an email to drama@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. #SAFM Talking Point.
We continue the conversation on the talking point of focusing on higher education and funding higher education. Professor Sizwe Mabizela is Vice Chancellor of Rhodes University, and he's calling for a rethink in terms of how we're financing our institutions of higher learning. So, Prof, if we are to look at higher education as a public good, and I don't know that there's necessarily anything that suggests at this point that we don't see it as a public good, but perhaps from your point of view, you can tell us what you think the changes that would come into effect would be if indeed we viewed public education, higher education, as a public good.
Cathy, the first thing we must ensure that as a proportion of the GDP, we do increase funding for higher education. What has happened over the past number of years is that there has been a decline and there has been a shift of the funding from the state towards the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, which is important, but that increase in the funding of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme has been at the expense of the subsidy that is required to fund public higher education institutions. So we do need to increase that funding. And secondly, I think it is important, and again, I can't overestimate the importance of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme and the critical role that it plays. We do need to reimagine how that scheme works, because at the moment we have a national student debt which is sitting at about 18 billion rand. Young people some of whom are not able to receive their certificates because they owe higher education institutions. We need to find a mechanism, a proper mechanism to fund our students. And I've already pointed out one of the structural problems of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme with a threshold of 350,000. Cathy, if you have a family with 2 young people who are at university and the family income is about 500,000 rand, those students will not be covered by the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. So we need to find a different mechanism, a different structure, a different criteria that will cover all students. And in fact, some of these ideas were put forward by the commission that was put together after the Fees Must Fall. We not only need to provide funding, but we need to provide comprehensive, all-round support for young people at university.
Sure.
I can tell you one of the challenges is mental health. We need funding to deal with issues of mental health among young people in higher education institutions. So comprehensive funding is really, really important.
There are, of course, those who have the view that universities have not necessarily, as institutions, done themselves any favors, because we do still have, processes through the institution that cost so much from an administration point of view. So this idea of having more streamlined services and really being able to account for where the money that the institution is getting is going into.
Absolutely, Cathy. As public institutions funded by the public purse, we have a responsibility of public accountability. Each one of our public universities must fully account for every cent that is paid by ordinary citizens of this country to support higher education. So if there's any university that is wasting resources provided by the ordinary citizens of this country, that institution must be taken to task. Higher education is funded by ordinary citizens. The tax that you pay at the till when you do your shopping. That funds our public higher education system. And therefore, we have a responsibility of accounting for each and every cent that is spent in our public higher education institutions. As should any public entity. We have had a huge problem of corruption in this country, wastage of much needed resources. We really need to up our game, root out corruption, whether it is in public universities or in any other public entity. We must be firm and be very decisive in dealing with those.
Romeo, you're calling us from KZN. Good morning to you.
Yes, let me quickly ask my question to the professor. Thank you very much. I heard the professor saying to you, we need skills as of now. And I heard you saying that they have already spoken about the number of students which they want. Already they've got applications plus or minus 120,000. I wanted to ask the professor, through the Minister of Higher Education, do you from time to time sit down with the national government to create more institutions? If so, why we do not have many institutions to accommodate these students? Already, if that's 16,000, think about it, the other 100 and maybe 106 or so. Where do they will be? Where will they stay? Where will they go? Because otherwise they will come and sit at home doing nothing. Can't we create so many institutions such that we can accommodate all the skills that we need? Or else we can suggest hot sitting and the morning sitting for those who are non-residents. They come for the morning. And then those who are residents, they can go for in the afternoon. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not quite sure I follow, but Prof, maybe you had a better sense of what Romeo was saying?
Yes, Cathy, I think the caller was saying that we should be creating more institutions and more universities to cater for the demand. My response is that we need a multi-pronged approach to the problem. One, we do need perhaps a few more universities. But what we need most at this stage are TVET colleges providing quality artisanal education. We need plumbers, we need electricians, we need car mechanics, and those people will never be unemployed. So we need more young people going to TVET colleges. But as I've indicated, TVET colleges themselves need to get their act together so that they become institutions of choice. And indeed, we need perhaps a few more universities, given the size of the population. But the other problem that we have is simply that because of the problems with the post-school pathways and the limited opportunities beyond school, many young people end up going to university doing things that really do not appeal to them simply because they want to be at university. And they end up taking courses which do not align with the skills needs of the economy of this country. So they graduate with a degree qualification which does not improve their employment prospects. Not every young person needs to go to university. That's the bottom line. We need a multiplicity of pathways beyond school.
Just on this issue of courses that are available, should we not be taking courses that we know do not speak to our economic needs out of the prospectus or out of the curriculum? Should they still be available as options on offer? Because you and I both know that you will have a number of young people that will go and get into the marketing program. They'll get degrees, right? Marketing degrees. And what we have come to learn over the years is that a lot of those young people end up not even getting jobs, and yet they have degrees in marketing. Why do we still have so many of our institutions of higher learning taking on hundreds of kids into their marketing degree programs? And I'm sure there are other examples. I'm picking on that one because it's the one that comes to mind and that I know that we have quite a lot of evidence on.
Cathy, no, you shouldn't be taking anything out of our offerings. I think we should be limiting the number of students going into certain programs. Cathy, university education is far more than developing skills for employment. And so there is an important role played by sociology, anthropology, history, and all of those because of the nature of university education. What we need to do, though, as I've indicated, open more opportunities at TVET colleges, reduce the number of students taking some of the courses that do not readily lend themselves to employment, but we still do need them because most of them educate us about what it means to be fully human. And we need the arts, we need the humanities, we need the social sciences, because without those, and if we simply focus on the STEM subjects, we run the risk of producing young people who are technically competent, but are lacking in interpersonal skills, who do not understand what it means to be fully human. So I would guard against a utilitarian view of higher education. Higher education is much more richer than just preparing young people for employment. So that is important. But the point is well made, and here is the other structural problem, Cathy. You listened at the announcement of the results. The number of young people who had quality passes in physical science and mathematics has declined. And we should be worried as a nation in terms of our technological advancement and innovation and the like. We should be investing more in young people who pursue those subjects in order to be able to develop the kind of employment opportunities that we need. Okay. But I would be the first to defend the humanities, to defend the social sciences, and to defend the arts, because they have a vital role to play in any society.
And absolutely, the suggestion, Prof, is not that one must get rid of it all. I mean, I'm a product of the humanities, so absolutely not. But what I am saying is that with the high admission rates in some of these courses, we really are setting young people up for failure. And that is something that institutions of higher learning must acknowledge.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right in that regard. As I've indicated, over the years, I've seen young people who simply want to be at university. They try this particular faculty, they don't meet the criteria, they try another one and so on. But again, it has to do with issues of unemployment and the prospects of receiving funding from NSFAS, at least for that period of time. You will be receiving funding and you'll be pursuing whatever degree qualification you are at university. And I think we need to deal with these things even at school level with the career guidance and so on and so forth. But I think there is a lot more that needs to be done in terms of educating young people so that they don't simply say if they want to be at university at all costs, doing things that do not take them anywhere.
All right. Prof. Sizwe Mabizela, Vice-Chancellor of Rhodes University, let me thank you for your time on the Talking Point this morning. That's where we leave it with that particular conversation. The show will be back with you again tomorrow between 9 and midday. Up next, the book reading.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of the book These Things Really Do Happen to Me by Kaya Dlang, read by Lerato Mvelase.
You have Wi-Fi on the highway in Africa? Back in 2006, I was one of very few South Africans who'd started vlogging on YouTube. I knew that no South Africans were watching the video because YouTube wasn't a thing in this country back then, but I was something of a curiosity for many American YouTubers. It was shocking to them that I, as a person from Africa, had access to the internet, that I knew what YouTube was, and that I could, well, speak English. By the standards of the time, my vlogs had lots of hits. My 120-odd videos had a collection of just over 4 million views. A number of extremely popular YouTubers had started following me. They would recommend me, and I soon amassed a sizable following to warrant being called a YouTube celebrity by some. Back then, YouTube would put up a video they liked on the homepage. Once that happened, the video was guaranteed hundreds of hits, so it was a huge deal. One day in February 2007, I woke up to lots of emails congratulating me on being featured on YouTube's front page. It was Black History Month in America, and the featured video was one I'd called I Have a YouTube Dream, where I parodied Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech. As excited as I was to be featured, there was a lot of racial vitriol being thrown at me in the comment section of the video. Some African Americans were even upset that I was African and getting so many hits. Many users also found it hard to believe that I really was in Africa. Go back to Africa was a common expression thought to be an insult. I would respond simply saying, but I am in Africa. Around this time, there was a new live streaming video chat website that had just become popular among YouTubers. I was always getting emails being asked when I would join Stick'em. I didn't know what it was, but eventually relented and signed up. It was similar to what Instagram Live is now. You got on camera and everyone else joined your chat via text. My signature greeting on all my videos was, "What is occurring, everybody?" So when I logged into Stick'em and joined a popular YouTuber's chat, I typed, "What is occurring, everybody?" I received a few responses. OMG, is that the real Kaya V? My handle was Kaya V back then. OMG, Kaya V, please open up your Stick'em channel so that we can chat to you. When I created a channel, one popular YouTuber said, "I'm getting off my Stick'em now so that I can listen to you." I opened my channel and the responses came on. OMG, it really is the real Kaya V. There were hundreds of people chatting to me at a time. They asked a lot of questions. One morning, I was on my way to work with my cousin, Olisa. We were still living together then, so we drove together every morning in his BMW 3 Series. I would sit in the back responding to emails or to comments on YouTube. When I discovered Stick'em, I was always on the site on my way to work. Olisa was completely unbothered that I made him seem like he was my chauffeur. I used my Vodacom dongle on my laptop so I could be online while we were traveling. The first few times I appeared on Stick'em while driving, the Americans were what the kids call shook. They could not believe that I was talking to them in a moving car. Kaya V, do cars in Africa have Wi-Fi? How are you connected to the internet if you're in a car? My favorite was, do you guys have Wi-Fi on the highway in Africa? We don't even have that here in America. And then I would explain to them that I had an internet dongle connected to my laptop. Many of them didn't even know what that was. I was surprised that they didn't know what I was talking about, but also secretly proud that technology that was standard to many South Africans with internet access was a novelty to Americans back then. The sister I met once. I have two sisters from my mother, Sigelelwa, known as Sigi, and Sikulo, known as Siku. When we found out on my 6th birthday that my father had died, my parents had had only Siku and me. My mother would not remarry. She had a boyfriend, Tununu, also known as Donald, but she did not want to be tied down to a man. She was going to be her own woman without having to be identified as someone's wife. Tununu fathered my other siblings, Sikulo and Nganga. Nongeba, my mother, has gangster tendencies because she basically told him that the children were not going to be given his surname but that of her late husband. Why? Because I'm Nongeba. I imagine that's what she probably said. I don't know when I first heard that I had another sister from my father, Zandisile. He had fathered another child after he left us for Johannesburg to be with another woman. We lived in the Eastern Cape, and I would hear that I had a sister in Johannesburg, but she was nothing more than a distant rumor. I imagined she was some glamorous child because she was from Johannesburg. Her grandmother owned and ran a shebeen in Soweto. I figured that she was definitely well off because in the 1990s, families in the township that owned shebeens generally were abantwana baseshop. When I first moved to Johannesburg from Cape Town, I dated a determined, strong-willed and beautiful young woman by the name of Jabu Kwapa. I told her that I had a sister living in Soweto and I had never met her. She was surprised that I was okay with it. I had made the mistake of letting her know that my paternal grandmother knew the Soweto address off by heart. Jabu insisted that I call and ask her. Eventually I did, and she sent it to me. Jabu knew I had the address, and one day after church, Jabu said to me, Kaya, when are you going to see your sister? I just saw my sister in Cape Town last month, I replied. No, I mean the one in Johannesburg, she said. I kept quiet. It was all kinds of awkward now because at church, they had just preached some fluffy thing about love and reaching out to others. So now I felt that I had to say, I'd see her that day. I thought to myself, low blow, Jabu, really low blow. We don't have anything to hurry to after church. I can take you to see her. Ouch. I had no excuse. I couldn't drive and had no license either. Fine, we can go. I took out my Nokia cell phone and looked for the address my grandmother had sent me. Jabu and I eventually got to the address. I did not know what to expect. If my sister's grandmother had owned a shebeen, I had figured she must come from a middle-class home. It was a typical 4-roomed house. The gate was closed, and the street was still, with a few people passing by every now and then, which I found unusual for a township. Maybe it was the area. It was 11:30 a.m. I was terrified because I had never been to Soweto. All I knew about it was that there were lots of tsotsis. I thought that anybody who looked at me would immediately see that I was not from Soweto, and who knew what would happen to me. Where I come from, Soweto was considered a dangerous place. If you were not killed, you were scammed. My father was killed in this place. He was living here when he was stabbed to death long before he was even 30 years old. That was all I knew about it. Jabu parked the car outside the gate, and I asked her to wish me luck. I opened the gate and walked up to the unpainted house. There was no grass on the ground. It was hard clay with tiny pebbles. It looked like there had been a cement driveway many years before, but after disintegrating over time, it was all gone. I stood in front of the typical township house. 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms. My knuckles knocked on the door. Not too loud, not too soft either. After all, this was Soweto. It was dangerous. It was my first time. There was no answer. I didn't want to knock too soon after my initial knock. I waited, then folded my fist again and knocked. 1, 2, 3, 4. The knocking was louder this time, but I did not increase the speed with which I knocked. Depending on the nature of the knock, one can detect a sense of urgency, fear, disrespect, or cops. I wanted my knock to remain respectful and anonymous. The knock of an unsure stranger who may be at the wrong house.
That was another episode of the book These Things Really Do Happen to Me, written by Kaya Dlanga, read by Lerato Mvelase. The book is available online and in all leading bookstores countrywide. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursdays on The Talking Point. It is produced for the station by Vovi Patala, read by Lerato Mvelase, technical production Wiseman Manele, Nanda Koza, and Tato Mapurum.
12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 29th of January 2025. A very warm welcome to Update at Noon here on SAFM. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour,
we confirm and firmly believe that a sustainable solution can only be achieved through engagement, constructive dialogue, and a renewed commitment to peace.
East African countries have called for an emergency meeting to address the escalating security crisis in the DRC.
During the incident, there were many suspects that were said to have been involved in this. So we're working around the clock.
And police in Mpumalanga say they are hot on the heels of an unknown number of suspects who are believed to have been involved in the torching of 50 Patco buses. Coming up in sport,
TS Galaxy and Vasco da Gama meet in the last of the second round matches of the Nedbank Cup, and it's the last round of matches in the Champions League. Some big permutations coming up later on.
Can't wait. John Gericke with more details on that. And in the meantime, please let us know what's on your mind. Share your views with us on 41391. That's the SMS line number, and it's charged at R1.50 per SMS. You can also write to us via X, our handle at SABC News _radio, or you can send us a WhatsApp voice note on 082-692-3909. Well, these and more stories coming up on this Hump Day edition of Update at Noon. First, though, here's the latest news with Ondelambana. Thank you, Sakina. Top stories: resourcing of soldiers a concern for SANDF, and Patco Bus Company puts contingency measures in place. For SAFM News, I am Ondelambana, and a very good day. SANDF spokesperson Siphiwe Dlamini says South African soldiers deployed on a peacekeeping mission to the DRC are under-resourced. 13 SANDF soldiers have been killed in clashes against Rwandan-backed M23 rebels and the army. ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula at a media briefing yesterday declined to respond to questions on the circumstances leading to the soldiers' deaths, including reports that the soldiers involved in UN peacekeeping mission are under-resourced and were forced to surrender to the M23 rebels in the eastern town of Goma. Dlamini further elaborates.
And indeed, in this case, SADC is made up of 16 countries. Those countries that have not put boots on the ground will and have been giving resources in various ways, be it financial, be it support through transport and things like that. However, that is not enough. And where there's a shortfall, we have had as South Africans to tap from our own resources, and still that is not enough. So that argument stands. However, we are supported by other regions.
Meanwhile, South African National Defence Union Chief Negotiator Jeff Dubazana maintains that SANDF budget cuts have negatively impacted their members.
We are highly disturbed by what's happening in the DRC. This whole thing started last week Thursday up until now, and nothing has been said from our leader. All this simply because of the budget cuts that the Defence Force have been experiencing for the past 2 decades. That is a very serious problem. You know, the cuts have a rippling effect in terms of the effectiveness of the Defence Force.
Disgruntled community members from Inanda are demonstrating outside the Nduzuma Magistrates Court demanding the release of 12 people who were arrested for allegedly hacking to death 5 people in the area earlier this month. The bodies were discovered by the community at a local sports ground. Community members claim that the deceased were terrorizing the community. Mdu Hadebe is among those demonstrating outside court and says the accused are the ones who protect the community.
We are here for the second time. This is a date that was set by the court, the 29th and the 30th of this month, to make sure that when we go back at home, we are coming back with all our 12 brothers and fathers who were arrested last week in connection with the matters that we all know, we all see that is doing rounds in all media platforms.
The Padco Bus Company has assured commuters that they have put in place contingency measures to ensure uninterrupted transportation services to affected areas. This follows the torching of 51 Padco buses at multiple depots across the province of Mpumalanga, which left 2 employees injured. According to Padco spokesperson Lindo Kuhle, the company's managing director has allocated 50 buses to support the affected routes and maintain regular services.
What the managing director did immediately, he gave a mandate to operations managers across the operation here. So that is in Soweto, El Dorado Park, Soshanguve, and to said that they must come together, they must look at it fully up. What we've been able to achieve from that is that we've already allocated 50 buses from our pool that we use normally when we don't have other buses, right, or they break down or whatever. So there's 50 buses that are going to be allocated here by latest on Wednesday. So our passengers have that to look forward to.
The National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union is today expected to submit a memorandum of demand to the National Treasury and South African Reserve Bank in a bid to prevent the impending liquidation of Itala Bank. According to NEHAO, the bank's more than 400 workers will be negatively impacted should the Prudential Authority's application succeed. The union's Durban Regional Secretary Prince Mohlahlana says they will also be going to court on an urgent basis that workers be paid their salaries.
Our primary concern is more than 400 workers that are employed by the institution, Itala Bank. As things stand now, none of them have been paid. Their salaries were supposed to be paid on the 20th of January. They still have not been paid. They've just been left in the dark. So our view is that the manner in which this was done in a very hasty manner, which has now affected hundreds of workers who have to feed their families, but now they have not received their salaries because all transactions that the organization would have done have been frozen.
There's been a crash at a huge Hindu religious festival in India. The accident happened when people were sleeping by the river banks at Prayagraj were trampled by others who had taken a dip in waters. The BBC Samira Hussain reports.
Emergency personnel could be seen taking away bodies on stretchers. Piles of people's belongings, shoes, shirts, and blankets were left strewn across the riverbank. Officials are not saying how many people may have died or may have been injured. The Maha Kumbh Mela is one of the largest religious festivals in the world. Organizers were expecting at least 70 million devotees to come on Wednesday alone.
Recapping the top story, SANDF spokesperson Siphiwe Dlamini says South African soldiers deployed on a peacekeeping mission to the DRC are under-resourced. 13 SANDF soldiers have been killed in clashes against Rwandan-backed M23 rebels and the army. I am on the number of SFM News headlines at 12:30.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo.
Thanks, Ondela. Good afternoon, everybody. 8 minutes after 12 here on Update at Noon. And thanks so much for choosing to spend the next at least 51 minutes with us. Well, just taking a look at what's to come on the show, keeping an eye on cabinet, job creation, sustainable energy, reviving the country's economic situation, and of course, the recent killing of SANDF members in the DRC. These are among some of the issues that are set to top the agenda of the first cabinet Lekgotla of the year, which starts in Pretoria this afternoon. So it's a 2-day meeting, and it comes at a time when there are serious tensions among some GNU partners over a number of
acts which President Cyril Ramaphosa centered to. So that in light of next week's State of the Nation address is going to be interesting. And Tebo Mokobo takes a look at that for us. And then in the Eastern Cape, a formal inquest into the Highgate Hotel massacre is currently underway. That, of course, a special tribunal sitting in East London. And in May 1993, several unknown gunmen entered the Highgate Hotel in East London, opened fire on patrons in the hotel bar, and several people were killed, 5 to be exact. 7 others were injured, and of those 7 who were injured, 2 have since passed away. So we'll speak to our reporter Sitima Mfeko there to just get an update on that. First few days we heard police had lost fingerprints, among other things, and it was actually quite somber listening to the surviving victims when they walked through the bar, just reliving and recalling what had happened on that fateful day. So Stima will bring us more on the latest developments there. And then the DRC situation. So we are keeping an eye on that and hoping to just bring you a further update. And we'll speak to our reporter in Kinshasa. Also try to check in with the United Nations regarding the humanitarian situation that is unfolding there. And to that end, rather in keeping with that particular story of what's happening in the DRC, we'll also go to the Northern Cape, where there is a business forum operating around one of the army bases in Postmasburg, and they are holding peaceful demonstrations outside the army base in solidarity with the families who have lost loved ones in the DRC. And the organization says that government must start listening to the cries of those who are affected and reconsider the deployment of South African soldiers for regional stability and peacekeeping purposes. So that is something that we'll bring you more on. And of course, still staying with that story, an emergency meeting of the Great Lakes region is also being held there. And we know that Kenyan President William Ruto has called a summit of the East African community as well, and that's for today. So those are some of the stories we hope to bring you updates on.
Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
In fact, we start with that story. Kenyan President and Chairperson of the East African Community, William Ruto, has called for an extraordinary summit to address the escalating security crisis in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. This after the M23 took control of Goma, which is the capital of North Kivu province, which is also home to about 1 million people. Michael Baleke reports from Kampala.
The M23 rebels say they have taken over the strategic city of Goma in North Kivu province. Goma airspace is closed and all activities in Lake Kivu are suspended. The city fell under the rebels on Sunday after Congolese forces retreated and handed over their weapons to the UN peacekeeping mission, MONUSCO. This has caused a humanitarian crisis, with thousands fleeing towards Rwanda. The UN Secretary General has called for a ceasefire, and the EAC chairperson William Ruto has convened a high-level meeting to resolve the crisis.
As the current chair of the East African Community, Kenya is aware of the region's critical responsibility in de-escalating violence and facilitating dialogue between the parties involved. We confirm and firmly believe that a sustainable solution can only be achieved through engagement, constructive dialogue, and a renewed commitment to peace.
DR Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi has accused Rwanda of backing the M23 rebels. A government spokesperson said the Rwandan forces were sighted in Goma. Rwanda says it is being scapegoated and blames the fighting on the DRC. Reports also indicated Rwanda and Congolese forces exchanged fire along their shared border. There are fears that this could escalate the already delicate situation, which has left peacekeepers and foreign fighters dead and thousands of Congolese displaced. Michael Baleke, SABC News, Kampala.
And we're just trying to get hold of our reporter, our correspondent in Kinshasa, Chris Okamaringa, and this is government officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo have now appealed for calm after protesters who were angered by the rebel assault on the city of Goma attacked a number of embassies in Kinshasa. The diplomatic premises of Rwanda, Uganda, France, and Belgium, we are told, were among those that were targeted. So just hoping that we will at some point be able to get hold of Chris, but of course struggling at the moment to get through to him. So let's park that leg for the time being. The United Nations has reported that the flare-up of fighting has also led to, among humanitarian consequences, among others, the displacement of over 400,000 people. For more, we are joined on the line now by Adrian Abayan, who's the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, global spokesperson. Thanks so much for your time and welcome to Update at Noon.
Thanks for having me.
May I please just have you say your name for me, please?
Oh, Eugene Bian.
Eugene Bian. Thanks so much for that. Ms. Bian, firstly, can you just give us, from the United Nations perspective, your assessment of what is currently happening in the Eastern DRC?
What we're witnessing at the moment in the Eastern DRC is the one of the worst humanitarian crises unfolding. DRC is once again reeling from an appalling the escalation of violence, compounding an already dire humanitarian crisis because of decades of conflict and insecurity and then chronic instability, which have left millions of people vulnerable and their lives defined by displacement and uncertainty.
And if we look at the response of the international community to this crisis, how would you describe that?
We describe what we're calling to a warring party is we have to prioritize the protection of civilians, which include internally displaced persons. We're talking about North and South Kivu in Eastern DRC, which are already hosting 4.6 million people internally displaced. And we're hearing the report of attacks on internally displaced persons' site, which completely undermine the sanctity of the spaces, which are intended to provide safety and humanitarian assistance. We are hearing that during the weekend that the bombing falling onto those IDP sites over the weekend, which within the hour, panicking and fearing those 300,000 even more people has to evacuate from those sites, which also took lives and injured the innocent civilian. This is the crisis. The civilians are once again bearing the brunt of the conflict.
Ms. Bian, has the United Nations and other aid agencies been able to provide humanitarian aid to those displaced populations?
This is our biggest concern because of insecurity in and around the Goma, that the UNHCR and other humanitarian agencies are unable to reach out those in need and those most vulnerable. So now we are hearing the people are wandering around, the displaced family who are left wandering around place to place in search of safety and shelter, but without direction.
And of course, that compounds the situation that is already dire. And if we think about those who usually suffer most, women and children, sexual violence has been flagged as a key component of this conflict. Is this something that you have also been aware of and that you are hearing of on the ground?
Unfortunately, this vulnerability that imposed to women and children are not new in this situation. As I mentioned, that this decade-long conflict impacted civilian and the most severely women and girls. And we're hearing the incident, increased incident already before this conflict, this new conflict. And now there's a new conflict where that the most of the humanitarian agency cannot reach those the population. Our concern is, of course, that that will increase the risk of sexual and gender-based violence.
So what can the world do at this point? Because, again, another conflict situation, as you say, one that has gone on for a decade at the least. So what should the world be doing? How do we start to move towards a peaceful settlement here?
Well, we have to remember that this DRC humanitarian crisis is not just a regional concern, but it has to be a global responsibility. The displaced Congolese, they deserve an opportunity to live with the safety, dignity, and hope. The international community really must not only condemn this atrocity toward the civilian, but also step up effort to support affected population and not forget about the displaced family. And most importantly, we need to facilitate long-term solution to end the cycle of violence in the DRC.
We'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much to Eugene Bien, who is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, global spokesperson in terms of the latest there, and very worrying as she points out that the United Nations and other humanitarian agencies unable to provide basically food and other provisions to many of those who are displaced because of the safety concerns around the region. So saying the world really needs to step up here because the situation is one that is really, really untenable at the moment. All right, we move from there and we are going to try and get back to our reporter, our correspondent there, but unfortunately still unable to get through to him. So let's take you to this because despite appeals from the Security Council, the M23 rebels supported by Rwanda's Defense Force launched an attack on Goma using heavy direct and indirect fire attacks that continue to ravage the city and is threatening a third Congo war. Now, that was the message to the council by MONUSCO's Deputy Special Representative for Protection and Operations, who further warned against growing ethnic tensions to the conflict, while also highlighting that immediate action was required to alleviate the suffering of civilians who are unable to take care of themselves and also to enable life-saving humanitarian efforts to proceed. And this comes as the DRC's foreign minister implored the council to act while South Africa's envoy called on the body to bolster support which would provide the South African Development Community Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo a bit more support there. And also they have suffered the majority of losses as the SAMI DRC contingent in this recent escalation. Here's a report by Sherwin Bryce Pease.
A sobering briefing by UN officials speaking from Goma dressed in protective military gear given the dangerous situation unfolding around them. Listen to Vivian van der Per, MONUSCO's Deputy Special Representative responsible for protection and operations.
We stress that military action cannot resolve this conflict. It is imperative that all parties cease hostilities and commit to political dialogue in order to prevent further civilian suffering. Resuming the Luanda process is of the utmost urgency to ensure a path towards de-escalation and to avert the looming threat of a third Congo war. We remind all parties of their obligation to uphold international humanitarian law and stress that attacks on United Nations peacekeepers may constitute war crimes.
A UN spokesperson earlier confirming that Secretary General Antonio Guterres spoke by phone with both DRC President Felix Tshisekedi and then with Rwandan President Paul Kagame, emphasizing with the latter the need to protect civilians in eastern Congo. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs also reiterated calls on the parties to do all they can to spare civilians in their military operations, and that schools, hospitals and other civilian infrastructure must be protected in line with international humanitarian law. Non-essential UN staff have been temporarily relocated outside of Goma, while UN peacekeeping personnel and troops have largely been forced to shelter in their bases, with the DRC's top diplomat expressing her frustration that the Council has yet to take a firmer hand with those groups violating a country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Foreign Minister Therese Kaikwamba Wagner.
The expectations is, of course, that the Security Council rises to the occasion. If we're meeting 48 hours after the last declaration and the last statement of the Security Council, then it means that it had no impact. We have come for impact, we have come for results, and we have come for clear action. And in 48 hours, 4 more South African peacekeepers were killed. The Council needs to act.
Has Goma fallen? Has Goma fallen?
The Council needs to act.
Kigali's envoy Ernest Ramwakyo reiterated their position that a coalition of forces near its border posed an existential threat to his country, justifying a defensive posture, and accused the DRC president of a thirst for regime change in Rwanda.
The coalition of anti-Rwanda forces on our border poses an existential threat to our country, which is not the case for the government of Kinshasa, which feels insulated from whatever happens 2,000 kilometers away. The border of Rwanda is 2,000 kilometers away from Kinshasa. A shell from across in DRC that falls on Rwandan territory falls on a very densely populated villages, and lives are lost. Even one bullet takes a life. Those in Kinshasa will not stay awake when such insecurity happens. So we are very serious when we talk of an existential security threat to Rwanda.
Pretoria's envoy, Ambassador Matu Joini, reflected on the loss of lives of SANDF troops in the conflict and called on the Council to speak with one voice to stop the carnage unfolding.
This illustrates that the M23 is well-resourced and would have acquired such resources through means that are against the sanctions imposed by this Council. It is a contradiction in terms that a major UN peacekeeping troop contributing country could provide resources to an illegal armed group that is conducting offensives against peacekeepers, civilians, and key infrastructure, thereby undermining the mandate of this Council. That must be addressed with utmost urgency.
She called for more support for SAMI DRC.
The UN needs to, as a matter of urgency, provide additional support to MONUSCO in order to reinforce operational positions. This is to ensure that MONUSCO can fulfill its primary mandate to protect civilians. This support will also assist to ensure that no further peacekeepers' lives are lost. Similarly, a stronger consideration must be made to bolster the support that MONUSCO provides to the South African Development Community Mission in the DRC, SAMI DRC. Both missions, have the primary responsibility of protecting civilians and key civilian infrastructure.
After a ministerial meeting of the AU Peace and Security Council on Tuesday, the East African community will hold an extraordinary summit at heads of state level later Wednesday to address the situation in the DRC, with participation expected from both Presidents Tshisekedi and Kagame. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York.
And of course, we have been able to get hold of our correspondent who is in the DRC in Kinshasa, and this is where we heard government officials appealing for calm after protesters actually were angered by the latest developments in Goma. But let's speak now to our correspondent Chris Ochamaringa. Chris, good afternoon. So Kenya has announced a crisis summit for today, but what more do we know? Do we know if Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi and his Rwandan counterpart Paul Kagame will actually attend?
Well, according to reports by some media houses in Kinshasa, President Felix Tshisekedi is not going to attend this meeting. He acknowledged the efforts that are being were moved forward by members of the East African Community Regional Bloc, and he appreciated that they are calling for this conflict to be resolved through dialogue, but he said he's not going to be able to attend given the situation, the crisis in Eastern DRC. He has been involved in a number of meetings with government officials, military officials, trying to find a way of resolving this conflict. And so it looks like the president is not going to attend, but the DRC government has been attending a number of meetings with the United Nations Security Council, urging them, to impose sanctions on Rwanda. They're saying the kind of statements that have been made condemning the violation of the DRC's sovereignty and territorial integrity are not enough. There needs to be tougher action that will compel Rwanda to stop supporting the M23 rebels.
Chris, with regard to the protests that were taking place, what is the state of play there, and what are the people saying on the streets?
Well, so the protests broke out on Tuesday. They were very, very wild. Many hundreds of young people stormed embassies of Rwanda, Uganda, the United States, France, and Belgium, vandalized these embassies. We saw videos of them looting property. And these young people were saying that these countries have been supporting Rwanda in one way or another, either through financial aid or military aid. And so they're saying this aid has been used to support the M23 rebels who are destabilizing their country. That is the source of the anger. Currently, there's no more protests. Business is back to usual. The government has issued a very tough statement warning any protesters of facing very stern action. They will be arrested, and they have banned all kinds of protests. They expressed their regret to all the embassies, the foreign missions that were vandalized, and assured them that they're going to beef up the security at all these missions, and so that this kind of incident does not reoccur.
And did that communique contain any sort of official explanation for why President Tshisekedi will not be participating in those talks?
Well, there was no explanation, but according to some people I spoke to who were close to the presidency, they said that the president is preoccupied with dealing with issues within the country. He cannot go out to attend that extraordinary summit that has been called by the East African Community Regional Bloc. And that is what we have heard so far. The president is expected to address the nation about this crisis in the city of Goma. And so I think that's also another reason why he might not be able to make it the other side. He has to talk to the people here to kind of give them some hope, because very many people are desperately in need of assistance in eastern city that has been, surrounded by the M23 rebels. Some of them do not have food, water. They're holed up in their houses. And so the president wants to kind of give them some reassurance that the government is going to do something to resolve this problem.
Have to leave it there. Chris Ochamaringa, who is our correspondent in Kinshasa in the DRC, with the latest from there. Well, thanks so much, Chris. It is time now for your headlines with Onde Lambana.
Thank you, Sakina. In the news headlines, South African soldiers deployed on a peacekeeping mission to the DRC are under-resourced. 13 SANDF soldiers have been killed in clashes against Rwandan-backed M23 rebels and the army. The South African Property Owners Association has highlighted the significant risks posed by the deteriorating municipal governance in the country, which threatening investor confidence. And the U.S. government is offering millions of federal employees the chance to leave work immediately but continue to be paid until the end of September. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
It's a Wednesday. Our analyst this afternoon, Lindile Malgas, an investment strategist at Absa Investments. Good afternoon, Lindile.
Good afternoon, Sakina. So we did see global equities have a bumpy start to the week, and this was on the back of news around Chinese competition within the artificial intelligence space, as well as trade tensions. Now, subsequent to that, global markets are in the green across the board. So locally, all shares trading up by 0.5%, and the performance has been driven by a rebound within resources, whilst we saw financials and industrials continuing to add on to those gains. And the local currency that has seen a bit of volatility lately, it is edging up today slightly ahead of the US Fed meeting, now trading around 18 Rand 70 cents to the dollar. We have not seen a lot of economic data this week, but we are expecting the US Fed to announce their interest rate decisions tonight. Market is expecting rates to be unchanged, and we are also expecting within the US the fourth quarter GDP figures later this week. And then locally, the Reserve Bank will also convene tomorrow. Markets here are expecting a 25 basis points cut for the first meeting, with room for further cuts down the line. And then looking at some of the company news, Woolworths did release a third quarter trading update. We did see mid-single digit growth within revenue. The food business continuing to deliver excellent results, albeit seeing a moderation within those growth rates, whilst you are seeing that the apparel business is seeing a small rebound there, so growing by low single digits. Markets did have a muted reaction within the results, so the share was down marginally. And then in contrast, looking at a company like ShopRite, they also released results yesterday. It was another set of strong results, especially within the supermarkets business, within the local segment, that growing by double digits, whilst we also saw the other operating segments delivering single-digit growth. Markets did react positively to this update, with the share ending higher. Thanks, Akina.
Lindile Malgas, thanks so much for your time, investment strategist at Absa Investments.
SAFM Sport with John Gerika.
Well, he's not sitting next to me. Somewhere,
Yeah, you sad. Are you
somewhere,
sad?
though. He's somewhere. Hello, John.
Don't be sad. It's okay.
Yeah, shame.
Can you imagine the two of us? It must be so lonely without me there, all quiet and
It
calm.
is. I didn't know what to do with myself. Who must I talk to? Like, yeah.
Okay, tomorrow we're back again. All right, Let me tell you some sport, if you don't mind. Nedbank Cup action finishes today. Well, we'll see. It's TS Galaxy against Vasco da Gama at 7 o'clock. First, let's hear from TS Galaxy coach Adnan Beganovic.
Me, like coach, like TS Galaxy club, technical team, we can't account on easy game. We always prepare yourself and team to be on the top, to play hard, like we train. And then in the end, we show in last 8 games, I think with Sundowns, we are only unbeaten team in PSL League.
Well, it's the last of the second round matches, unless you count that Royal AM match against Milford FC. Still don't really know what's happening with that game. In the Champions League today, it's the last round of matches in the new pool stage. Liverpool top the table ahead of Barcelona. They'll finish either first or second, depending on the results. Manchester City are out of the playoff zone. More of that in a moment. All the games kick off at 10 o'clock tonight, so a busy night for football fans. Villa against Celtic today. Villa midfielder Jacob Ramsey is excited to be at Villa Park this evening.
Me personally, from where I've come from the academy, and to think when I was 8 years old, when I signed for Villa, to be playing it in Champions League at 23 years old and at Villa Park, and my family and friends are in the stadium. So yeah, I'm sure before the game, when the music comes on and the anthem comes on, I'll be looking up to my family and friends, and it's a pinch me moment really. But yeah, I think after that is focus on the game.
Barcelona against Atalanta, Sparta Prague go to Bayer Leverkusen, Bayern Munich hosts Slovan Bratislava, Brest against Real Madrid, Dynamo Zagreb host AC Milan, Shakhtar Donetsk go to Dortmund, Girona host Arsenal, Gunners are all but in the last 16, they sit 3 points clear of the playoffs with a much better goal difference than any other team on 13 points. Inter take on Monaco, Juventus against Benfica, Lille host Feyenoord. Now the big Manchester City story is 25th spot. City are 2 points off the first round of the knockout phase. They meet Club Brugge tonight. Manager Pep Guardiola is seeing this game as a bit of a final.
It's not personally for me, it's for the club, and of course it will be not good, but I'm not thinking about that right now. So I know for all the people concerned about what's going to happen in qualifying, I appreciate it, your concern, and all of you to don't qualify, but I'm thinking we're going to do it.
PSV host Liverpool today. Arne Slot says his side will be ready for this evening, but there are injury concerns.
These players are ready, so all the ones that are left behind could have played tomorrow, but for the long term, so it doesn't tell you anything about the short term, so it doesn't tell us anything about the Saturday game, but for the long term, if you look back at our season, it's been almost every time after 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, we gave them the break during the week, when it was a League Cup or an FA Cup. If there was a moment for them to get some freshness back, we've always done that. And it took me a while to understand this new format, but I always say when I think I'm 100% sure I use 99.9, but now I can say I'm 100% sure that it doesn't matter at all if we end up 1 or 2. Because we will play 14, 15, 16 or 17, and then in the end it's a draw which of the teams we are going to face.
All of the games kick off at 10, reminder. Now, other football news. Coach Pitso Mosimani's officially parted ways with his Iranian top-flight club, Esteghlal FC. Mosimani's departure is effective immediately, and he cited unresolved salary disputes that also is affecting his technical team. He left the Saudi club Al Ahly, remember his first coaching stint outside of Africa in 2023, also due to unpaid salaries. Now, let's continue with our look at Marcus Rashford at Manchester United. We get a different perspective today. Former midfielder Paul Scholes feels that Rashford should be banished from the Manchester United dressing room after getting a lot of people down.
Look, I remember years ago when I told the manager I didn't want to play in that Arsenal game, the cup game, and the meeting we had afterwards, 2 or 3 days afterwards, and I thought, I'm going to get a right bollock here. He said to me, the worst thing you did is let your teammates down, and that really stuck with me. Because I wasn't really thinking about that. And now I think Marcus Rashford is doing exactly the same. Okay, he's not refusing to play, but in the way he's behaving and the way he's training, in a way, he is saying, I don't want to be involved with these. So I think the fact of letting your teammates down in that dressing room, he should be banished from the dressing room. Really. If he's in and around that, and young people are seeing that as an example, the sooner he's gone, the better.
No. After what that gaffer said.
Yeah.
You cannot blame Marcus Rashford for anything he does. Let the boy go.
But now there's the transfer window's closed, and there were 2 issues with that. The one was that he was asking too much money to be able to move, or there wasn't enough money. Whatever the case is, he's stuck.
Him, you still don't let him go. Then you say you'd rather play, some geriatric coach than play him.
Yes.
And he's supposed to be okay with that. And you expect him to be all chirpy tomorrow on the training ground, really?
No, okay. It's an ongoing story. It's our story. We're going to keep a close eye. I have to tell you about a cricket test match on the go. Australia against Sri Lanka. Australia last I saw, in fact, 320 for 2. This is in the 3rd session of day 1 of the first test in Gaul. Steve Smith, 101. Usman Khawaja on 141 not out. Australia dominating day 1 there. Tennis news, Novak Djokovic has withdrawn from Serbia's Davis Cup tie against Denmark because of that injury. Serbia playing Denmark in a first-round qualifying tie that starts on Friday. And finally, Sakina, Mercedes driver Andrea Kimi Antonelli. He's going to be driving for Mercedes-Benz. He's taking Lewis Hamilton's position in Mercedes-Benz. He's teaming up with George Russell. He's just turned 18, the minimum age for getting a driver's license. And the good news is he passed his driver's test.
I saw that. But listen, big ups to the lad, and hopefully he does well.
Yeah, he's got some shoes to fill.
Yeah.
And I think George Russell as a teammate is going to be difficult.
But here's the thing. You rather have an 18-year-old. You know how 18-year-olds are. He's not going to care. Just put pedal to the metal and that's that.
He wasn't even born when Lewis was making his
so
start.
he won't care. So I think he's absolutely the perfect person to step in there.
Okay, we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Life is too short for long-term grudges, but when it's the Soweto Derby, black and white confronts gold and black. The Buccaneers believe while Amakhosi still emphasize experience Mzansi's biggest football rivalry, Orlando Pirates versus Kaizer Chiefs, on Saturday, 1 February at 2 p.m. live on SABC1 and at 3:30 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
SABC CSI, in partnership with SAFM, will be giving away 20 laptops to Tetlanyo Secondary School in Kimberley on the 31st of January 2025. Tetlanyo Secondary School has been nominated by the SABC to receive 20 laptops after writing a donation request to enhance their ambitions to be 4IR compliant and increase the number of learners ready to participate fully and productively in the country's economy. Tune in to SAFM on the 31st of January and listen to The Talking Point, broadcasting live from the Tetlanyo Secondary School. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
Time to take a look now at some of your messages. Let's start with this. Pilani says, Sakina, since it's not a secret anymore that our SANDF are not well equipped, have enough resources or support for this war in the DRC, isn't it a failure to withdraw? Doesn't that mean that our leaders are sacrificing our soldiers for whatever selfish reasons of their own? That's from Pilani. And then Nkosimpile Mkunu says, who is funding M23? You can see that this group is well funded. The DRC had this issue of fighting for years, and where is the AU? This should have been resolved a long time ago, but I think this conflict is benefiting some powerful people. And also, SK, Trump suspended U.S. aid, and this could spell a crisis for South Africa's fight against HIV and AIDS. Why are we not building our own capacity? Why are we so dependent on the West? Why are our leaders so comfortable with this? That's from Nkosimpile Mkunu. And then we also have this one from Vugani. Vugani Ngobo says, this emergency meeting cancelled by the president of called by the president of Kenya, William Ruto, should have happened a long time ago. I wonder why our African leaders want to see some tragic event before taking charge of situations. I just hope, though, that this is not another talk shop, because this is a crisis. Well, you've just heard it's not going to happen because President Tshisekedi will not be attending. So that is the latest. Let's listen to some of your voice notes.
Good day. Bishop Makwana from Leboa Home Zone F. You know, Sakina, my understanding is that Paul Kagame is testing our military mind. And he's doing by all means using his tactics to ascertain to the world that we are poorly developed. And because we have a poor leadership by Cyril Ramaphosa, whom has put an incapacitated individual to run the military, we will do nothing. But my belief is that we must retaliate with hate and multiply so that we could survive this.
Good afternoon, Sakina. This poaching of buses in Mpumalanga is not a new thing. Most of the problems here in South Africa, it's a self-created problem, scoring on goals. Things like this started when the 5th administration president, who was supported 100% by his own, gave the taxi associations license to have and own rifles and automatic weapons. And from there, they started closing the freeways and blocking the roads, disrupting everybody because they thought they were more stronger than the government. Now it's coming back to hit the government. So this one, the government shouldn't give them even bail. Thank you, Anonymous from Soweto.
Good day, Sakina. This is from Bloemfontein. Why can't we send maybe 2 Royal Falcons to Congo and deal with these M23 rebels? I think 2 Royal Falcons are enough to do the job. We cannot allow a situation where our soldiers will be killed like that without responding decisively. And the second issue, can you please ask John what will happen to Royal AM's match for Nedbank, because their games have been suspended. So what will happen to the toss and that fixture?
Well, thank you so much. And John said it in his crossing there that that's the one outstanding, and we are not sure at this point what's going to happen. So I suppose just awaiting official confirmation of what is going to happen, whether Royal AM will forfeit that match, but that's the only outstanding result from the last round. And also just with regard to, I think a few of you asked about South Africa retaliating to what's happening in the DRC. And interesting, Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General of the ANC yesterday, during their press briefing, was asked this question in various guises as well. And his response, I thought, was rather instructive, because he says, South Africa, what we need to remember is that our South African SANDF members are not there to fight a war. They are not there to fight anybody. They are essentially there as part of a peacekeeping force. And therefore, it would make no sense for South Africa then to now start sending whatever over to go and start engaging in a war, because effectively South Africa is not at war with anybody. South Africa is not fighting a war. So I don't know whether you take that or don't take it, but I thought, that was quite instructive in terms of where we find ourselves in this whole malaise. But let us know your thoughts all the same, and if we have more time, a little bit, we'll squeeze in a few more of your responses.
The Toffees are well aware that only maximum points will help them out of the bottom half.
Lewin, great feat, brilliance, absolutely superbly done. Calvert-Lewin for Everton.
Meanwhile, the Foxes believe they are in dire need of victory to run away from trouble.
It's Jordan Ayew, back in goal. Jordan Ayew has scored for Leicester City, and those Leicester fans are celebrating wildly.
This is the Premier League. Experience the superb contest, Everton FC versus Leicester City FC, on Saturday 1 February at 4:30 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
And welcome back. Just a quick one here. Just received a statement from the presidency, statement by President Cyril Ramaphosa on the recent developments in the eastern DRC and deaths of South African soldiers, Wednesday, 29 January 2025. I'm going to quickly read this to you. It says, fellow South Africans, following the recent intensification of fighting in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, South Africa has lost 13 brave soldiers who were dedicated to their mission and committed to peace. The fighting is the result of an escalation by the rebel group M23 and Rwanda Defense Force militia engaging the armed forces of the DRC and attacking peacekeepers from the SADC mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, on behalf of the government and the people of our country, I express our sincerest condolences to the families, their loved ones and colleagues. We bow our heads in honor of their heroic and gallant fight for peace. We honor and mourn them. Our necessary support is being provided. All necessary support is being provided to the families of the deceased and the families of the injured. The process to repatriate the remains of the deceased is underway. The attacks on peacekeepers resulted in the deaths of semi-DRC members from other troop contributing countries, namely Malawi and Tanzania, as well as members of the UN Organization Stabilization Mission in the DRC Brigade. We honor all the lives that were lost and pass our condolences to their families, governments, and citizens. The situation in Goma and Sake, where our troops and their counterparts are stationed, remains very tense, volatile, and unpredictable. The Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Ms. Angie Motshekga, and the Chief of the South African National Defense Force, General Rudzani Mapwanya, and the SAMI-DRC Force Commander, Major General Monwabisi Jakupo, are working to ensure that the SAMI-DRC forces remain well equipped and sufficiently supported during this critical mission. We are concerned about the speculation about the state of our troops and the battle conditions. All South Africans must rally behind our brave men and women who are dedicated, who have dedicated their lives to bringing peace in our continent. South Africa's military presence in the eastern DRC is not a declaration of war against any country or state. The members of the South African National Defense Force that are in the DRC are part of both SADC and United Nations efforts to bring peace and to protect thousands of lives that are constantly threatened by the conflict in the DRC. The presence of the SAMI-DRC forces demonstrates a commitment of SADC member states to supporting the DRC in its efforts to achieve lasting peace and stability and ultimately create an enabling environment for sustainable development and prosperity. We welcome the position that was recently adopted by the United Nations Security Council during its special sitting on the situation in the DRC, which calls for an immediate end to hostilities, the reversal of territorial expansion by M23, the exit of external forces from the DRC, and the resumption of peace talks under the Nairobi process. The territorial integrity of the DRC must be respected in accordance with the United Nations Charter on respect of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of other states. We call on all parties to this conflict to fully embrace the current diplomatic efforts that are aimed at finding a peaceful resolution, including honoring the Luanda process agreements. We must silence the guns on our continent for the attainment of inclusive development and prosperity. I thank you. That was issued by the Presidency of the Republic of South Africa. So that is the latest from the Presidency.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
Now, reviving the country's economy, job creation, sustainable energy, and the killing of the South African National Defense Force members in the DRC are set to top the agenda of the first Cabinet Lekgotla of the year, which starts in Pretoria later today. The two-day meeting comes at a time when there are serious tensions among some GNU partners over a number of bills which President Cyril Ramaphosa has enacted. Now, the Freedom Front Plus has lobbied other parties to challenge the constitutionality of the Expropriation Act in the Constitutional Court, while the Democratic Alliance has lodged a formal dispute within the GNU. These partners are also poles apart on the Basic Education Amendment Act and the National Health Insurance Bill. Ndebo Mokobo has more.
At least 10 political parties in the GNU setup will meet at the Sefako Makato Presidential Guest House this afternoon